Chapter 450. I've said it many times. In this life, I will only love the flaming bar. My feelings are my own business. No one has the right to decide for me. Of course, I know that Si Xian treats me well. However, I can't accept this feeling. Si Xian, if your fiancé treats you well and doesn't affect you from following us, I won't object to you accepting this marriage. Miao Miao covered her mouth and looked at Chen Xishuan speechlessly. She had known about Chen Xishuan's engagement. Today, she wanted to sing along with Chen Xishuan and force Ji Dong and Chen Xishuan to return to Dongmu Empire to resolve this matter. At the same time, she wanted to push the boat forward. Perhaps the relationship between the two of them would improve. However, who would have thought that Ji Dong would reject her so coldly? He had once again made his feelings clear and rejected Chen Xishuan in public? What surprised Miao was that after hearing Ji Dong's words, Chen Xishuan did not look as if she was heartbroken. She was still looking at Ji Dong. At least, her body was calm, but the look in her eyes was very strange. Miao Miao rubbed her eyes hard and thought to herself, did I see it wrong? Ji Dong, that bastard, rejected her so bluntly in public, but why did Xishuan look at him with even more love? This girl's psychological quality is too good, isn't it? What Miao Miao did not know was that if Ji Dong's rejection had fallen on any other girl, no one would have been able to take it. However, Chen Xishuan was an exception. This rejection was a rejection of her current identity, but it was also a confession to her previous identity. Although Ji Dong's loyalty to the flaming bar made it impossible for Chen Xishuan to be with him, how could Chen Xishuan not be moved by his loyalty and deep feelings? Perhaps only Chen Xishuan herself could understand the complexity of this. After saying this, Ji Dong was also looking at Chen Xishuan. He had no choice but to say this. Miao Miao and Du Exan Er's words had reminded him that in the eyes of his companions, he and Chen Xishuan were already a couple. He did not want this feeling to spread to everyone's hearts. He also suddenly realized that he was getting more and more used to the feeling of having Chen Xishuan by his side. Saying these words not only directly rejected Chen Xishuan, but also strengthened his heart at the same time. Miao Miao was surprised. Ji Dong was even more surprised. Looking at Chen Xishuan's gaze that was filled with deep love and complicated emotions, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Why did this gaze look so familiar? It was as if he felt that the flaming bar was watching him. Ji Dong had originally planned to turn around and leave after saying this, but he couldn't move his feet no matter what. He felt as if the flaming bar was watching him. How could he bear to leave? The conflict in Chen Xishuan's heart was unimaginable. When she heard Ji Dong's unwavering confession and saw the determination in Ji Dong's eyes, she really wanted to tell him that she was the flaming bar. However, she couldn't. If she said it, it would only harm him. Not only could the two of them not be together, it would also cause his body and soul to be destroyed, never to be reincarnated. Taking a deep breath, Chen Xishuan tried her best to calm the impulses in her heart and said, "Teacher Ji Dong, I want to discuss something with you." Ji Dong asked instinctively, "What is it?" Chen Xishuan gently stroked the 2 strands of hair in front of her and said, "I want to hire you." "Hire me?" Ji Dong came to his senses at this moment. No matter how he looked, the person in front of him was Chen Xishuan, not his flaming bar. He composed himself and asked curiously, "You want to hire me?" Chen Xishuan nodded and said, "Teacher Ji Dong, although you aren't willing to accept my feelings, I hope that I can hire you to help me this time. Please pretend to be my lover and return to Dongmu Empire with me to settle the engagement. Once the engagement has been annulled, the hiring will be over." "No way," Ji Dong said without hesitation. He could feel that his resistance towards Chen Xishuan was decreasing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have rejected her so clearly. Why would he be willing to have a deeper relationship with her? "Xishuan, you can hire others, but I can't." Ji Dong turned around and didn't look at Chen Xishuan anymore. He was afraid that he would be swayed by Chen Xishuan's bitter but gentle gaze. Chen Xishuan shook her head gently and said, "No, no one else can. How can my imperial father not see if I have feelings for the person I bring back? Only you can help me. Teacher Jidong, don't be in a hurry to reject me. Listen to what I can offer first, all right?" After Jidong rejected Chen Xishuan, the heavenly stem holy disciples didn't say anything. After all, feelings were their own business. "Teacher Jidong, if I remember correctly, you said that you would offer a bottle of famous wine to your lover, the Flaming Bar, every year. Zhou Xiaoxiao showed us the list of the top 10 famous wines. You already have 6 of them. They are the second-ranked Blue Ghost Liquid, the third-ranked Vast Sea Nectar, the fourth-ranked Source of Life, the fifth-ranked 9 Revolutions Flaming Lava, the seventh-ranked Rare Gold Jade Nectar, and the ninth-ranked Lonely Moon. Among them, you have already offered the Source of Life to the Flaming Bar. You still have 5 bottles left. You still need 4 more to collect the top 10 famous wines. Those 4 wines are all produced in the 5 Elements continent." Jidong said indifferently, "Why are you saying all this? This is my own business." Chen Xishuan said, "This is your own business. But if I say that my reward is one of the other 4 famous wines, can I hire you?" Hearing this, Jidong suddenly turned around and looked at Chen Xishuan. He said, "You have one of the other 4 famous wines? That's impossible. They are all produced in the 5 Elements continent." Chen Xishuan took a deep breath and thought to herself, Jidong, I've really put in a lot of effort to pursue you. Do you know that there are 2 things I want to do now? One is to throw myself into your arms and feel the warmth you bring me again. The other is to beat you up. Teacher Jidong, don't forget that our Dongmu Empire is the country closest to the 5 Elements continent among the 5 great empires. We also share a border with the Holy Evil Island. In the past, before the war between the Holy Evil and the Holy Evil, a holy war had already broken out between the 2 continents. In the collection of the Dongmu Empire's royal family, there is a bottle of wine that was left from that time. It is called Netherworld Holly. It is ranked 8th among the 10 famous wines. This time, Jidong was really moved. He was definitely lucky to have 6 of the 10 famous wines. Of course, he understood that it would be extremely difficult to find the other 4 wines in the 5 Elements continent. He had agreed to Chen Xishuan's employment, and she would only need a month's time to complete her request. Now that he had obtained this bottle of wine, he couldn't be sure if there was such a wine left in the 5 Elements continent. Although the 10 famous wines were ranked one by one, they were all equally precious. Every bottle he found would bring him one step closer to the Flaming Bar's wish. He couldn't let go of such an opportunity. Even though he knew that Chen Xishuan had proposed this employment to get closer to him, he couldn't refuse. Looking deeply at Chen Xishuan, Jidong said in a deep voice, "When do we leave?" Chen Xishuan finally heaved a sigh of relief. She pulled down the veil on her face and smiled. The radiance on her delicate face caused the heavenly stem holy disciples, regardless of gender, to be a little dazed. She said, "There's no hurry. We'll return in half a year's time." "All right. I accept your employment," Jidong said in a deep voice. After saying that, he turned around and walked into the cave. Looking at Jidong's back as he left, Miao Miao moved closer to Chen Xishuan and said in a low voice, "That works too. That fellow finally gave in. Xishuan, you have to work hard." A smile appeared on Chen Xishuan's pretty face. She said, "Actually, I've already guessed that it's useless to play the emotional card with him. He'll only come with me if I offer him an irresistible condition." Fury asked, "Do you want me to go with you? After all, you'll be facing 2 Supreme Being experts." Chen Xishuan shook her head and said, "There's no need for that. Thank you, Brother Fury. Although the other party's family is powerful, we're still an empire. It's enough for me to have Jidong accompany me back. In fact, from what I can see, Ji-dong's cultivation is already comparable to any supreme being expert. Moreover, there's still me. The next morning, to the surprise of the heavenly stem holy disciples, the first guest they welcomed was not the Fire Dragon King, who had a close relationship with Ji-dong. Instead, it was the Dragon Emperor's official wife, the Diamond Dragon King. The Diamond Dragon King was much smaller than the Dragon Emperor. Other than the lack of the Golden Dragon Emperor crown on her head, her body was also crystal clear like the Dragon Emperor. She was noble and elegant, just like a noble lady. At this time, the sky had just brightened. The arrival of the Diamond Dragon King woke the heavenly stem holy disciples up from their cultivation. "I'm sorry to disturb your rest, guests from the humans." The Diamond Dragon King's voice was gentle and extremely comfortable. If one only heard her voice, no one would associate her with the king of the Dragon Clan. It must be known that the Diamond Dragon King was an existence that stood at the peak of the 10th grade magical beast. She was not much weaker than the heavenly stem divine beast. Hearing the sound, Ji-dong was the first to come out. He lifted his head to look at the Diamond Dragon King and said, "Hello, Senior Diamond Dragon King. Why are you here so early?" The Diamond Dragon King sighed softly and said, "Hello, Ji-dong, you can just call me by my name. I'm Irina. I've come this time to ask for a favor." As she spoke, her massive body slowly crouched down and lowered her head to Ji-dong. Ji-dong could clearly see that there seemed to be mist rising in the eyes of the Diamond Dragon King Irina. Her emotions were also very strong. Ji-dong hurriedly said, "Senior Irina, please tell me what you need. If it's within my capabilities, I'll definitely help you." Irina nodded gently. When she opened her mouth again, she sounded like she was about to cry. She said, "Ji-dong, the Dragon Emperor told you yesterday that he only has 2 children. They were born to me and Vanessa. Vanessa's child was lost for 3,000 years and was finally found. Although my child is by our side, it has mutated and has yet to hatch. Right now, there's only one method that we can try, and it might succeed." Ji-dong's heart skipped a beat. He already understood what Irina meant. He said, "You're saying that you want your child to sign a contract with one of us and use the power of the contract to help your child hatch?" Irina immediately nodded and said, "We've thought of this idea before, but we can't just randomly find someone to sign a contract with. Our child is the direct heir of the Dragon Emperor's bloodline. Since you can help Vanessa hatch the Maotai and Wuliangya that are affected by the cold, I think you can definitely help me too, right?" Her big eyes were filled with anticipation, and there were even tears rolling down her cheeks. Ji-dong said seriously, "Senior Irina, if I can help you, I'll definitely help you. However, I can't guarantee that it will succeed." Irina sighed, and 2 drops of crystal tears rolled down her cheeks. She said, "I know how difficult it is to hatch this child. Even His Majesty and I can't do anything about it. I just hope that we can give it a try. I wonder which one of you is willing to sign a contract with my child?" In fact, Ji-dong was in a dilemma. However, this was also a gamble. If the Dragon Emperor's child could hatch successfully, it would be like adding wings to a tiger for the Heavenly Stem's holy disciple with the guarantee of the contract. That was a diamond dragon with the potential of a sage. However, what if it couldn't hatch? One had to know that the contract of any magic master could only be signed once in a lifetime. He couldn't force any of his partners to take the risk. "Senior Irina, what is the attribute of your child with the Dragon Emperor? Yin soil or yang soil?" Irina immediately replied, "It's yang soil, which is yin soil. It has the same attribute as me." Ji-dong frowned slightly, and Lang Tianyi, who was standing not far behind him, also heaved a sigh of relief. If the child of the Diamond Dragon King and the Dragon Emperor was of the yang soil attribute, then he would undoubtedly be the most suitable candidate. Ji-dong knew about the risk, and of course, he also knew about it. From his point of view, he wasn't willing to take the risk. However, if it was really yang soil, he could only step in. He couldn't make things difficult for Jidong. Jidong said, "This is a little troublesome. Senior Irina, you should also know that when magical beasts and humans sign contracts, they usually have the same attribute. However, among us, Meow Meow, who has the yang soil attribute, has already signed a contract and has her own magical beast partner. It's a silver-winged eastern green." "What about the rest of you?" Irina asked eagerly. Jidong looked at her with some difficulty. He finally decided that he couldn't let his partners take the risk, even if it meant offending the dragon tribe. Irina looked at Jidong, and disappointment gradually appeared in her eyes. She sighed and said, "I'm sorry. I know that my request is too much." At this moment, a beautiful voice rang out. "Let me sign a contract with your child." Chapter 451. The Diamond Dragon King, Elisa, suggested that she hoped that one of the heavenly stem saints would sign a contract with her child. Through the power of the contract, she would try to hatch the child that she had not been able to hatch for many years. Just as Jidong was in a dilemma and Elisa was feeling disappointed, a pleasant voice rang out. "Let me sign a contract with your child." Upon hearing this voice, everyone's eyes turned to look behind Hyoheim. Just 3 steps behind her, Chen Sichuan, who had taken off her veil, took a few steps forward and came to Jidong's side. "Sichuan, you are a Viwood-type devil master. How can you do this?" Jidong was shocked and hurriedly reminded her. He definitely did not want Chen Sichuan to make this decision to help him. Even among the heavenly stem saints, there were differences in aptitude, and Chen Sichuan was obviously one of the few with the best aptitude. Jidong was very clear that in terms of aptitude, Chen Sichuan was definitely not inferior to him or his senior brother. It was just that she had always played a supporting role behind him in battles, so everyone did not know much about her strength. She would definitely be an outstanding Viwood-type devil master in the future. If her future development was affected because of the problem of the Devil Lord's partner, then it was definitely not a situation that Jidong wanted to see. Chen Sichuan seemed to have seen through Jidong's thoughts. She smiled and said, "This is my own decision, and it has nothing to do with you, Teacher Jidong. It is my honor to be able to sign a contract with the child of the Dragon Emperor and the Diamond Dragon King." Viwood type? The Diamond Dragon King blinked. Looking at Chen Sichuan's perfect face, which made even it feel jealous, it hesitated. Jidong was right. It was best to establish a contract between the two parties if they were of the same attribute. It could complement each other. Was it right to let its child sign a contract with a Viwood-type devil master? Chen Sichuan did not feel the slightest bit timid in the face of the Diamond Dragon King. She smiled and said, "Hello, Irina. I am willing to help you with this. I believe that if you were to find the most suitable person to sign a contract with your child, it would definitely be me. Although your child and I do not have the same attribute, firstly, we are both of the Een attribute. It is Een Earth, and I am Een Wood. Among the 5 elements, wood restrains earth, and earth gives birth to wood. In terms of attributes, we do not have much of an advantage. However, there is one thing that I can do better than anyone else. I have the eternal armor of the Goddess of Life on me, and I also have the core of life that Teacher Jidong has temporarily lent me. There is only one main reason why your child cannot hatch, and that is that its life force is insufficient to break through the hardness of the egg. This is admittedly because your child's eggshell is too hard, but it is also closely related to life force. I can provide the power of the contract and continuously provide it with a huge amount of life force as support. Perhaps I cannot help it hatch in a short period of time, but as time passes, I believe that there will definitely be a chance of success." After hearing Chen Sichuan's words, the Diamond Dragon King was shocked. She said, "Are you saying that after you sign a contract with my child, you will continuously use your life force to help it hatch? However, if you do that, it will affect your own cultivation. Wood element magic mages needed the life force of nature the most. Hence, wood-element magic mages had the longest lifespans among the magic mages. However, if a large amount of life force was released from one's body, then it would definitely affect the cultivation speed of a wood-element magic mage. In serious cases, it might even affect the health of a wood-element magic mage. Qin Sixuan smiled faintly and said, "I believe that I can handle it well. Furthermore, once I can help your child hatch, it will also be of great help to me." The Diamond Dragon King looked at Qin Sixuan's determined eyes, and her gaze gradually softened. She said, "Actually, even before my child hatches, I can still help you." As she spoke, the Diamond Dragon King slowly raised her left front claw and drew a strange symbol in the air. Suddenly, a door of light that rippled like water quietly appeared in front of her. The Diamond Dragon King extended her claw. When her claw reappeared, there was already a sparkling and translucent dragon egg in her hand. This dragon egg looked very peculiar. Its entire body was snow-white and translucent, as if it had been carved out of jade. It wasn't oblong like an ordinary egg. Instead, it was perfectly round like an enlarged glutinous dumpling. Its diameter was about a meter or so, and it didn't look big in the Diamond Dragon King's hand. However, when it was presented to the Heavenly Stem holy disciples, they could see how huge it was. There was even a faint layer of white halo emitting from this dragon egg, as if it was shining with the light of a treasure. Any Heavenly Stem holy disciple could clearly sense the massive mana contained within it, as well as the strong life force it exuded. The Diamond Dragon King placed the dragon egg in front of Qin Sixuan and used a finger to gently stroke the egg. She said, "My darling, I don't want to leave you either. However, in order for you to hatch, I have no choice but to make you sign a contract with a human. Can you forgive me?" As soon as the Diamond Dragon King finished speaking, the snow-white dragon egg actually started to spin rapidly. As it spun, a protruding part of the dragon egg pointed in Qin Sixuan's direction, and then at herself. This scene left the Heavenly Stem holy disciples dumbfounded. Even Qin Sixuan, who was the owner of the flaming bar, couldn't help but be surprised. However, the Diamond Dragon King seemed to be used to this. She nodded at the dragon egg and said, "Darling, that's her. Are you satisfied with this human partner?" The dragon egg spun and actually rolled out just like that. It circled around Qin Sixuan once, and even caused Ji Dong, who was standing next to Qin Sixuan, to have no choice but to retreat to the side to avoid being hit by it. An even stranger scene appeared. After circling around Qin Sixuan once, the dragon egg shrank slightly and actually jumped into the air, letting out a series of cheerful cries. The layer of white light surrounding the eggshell suddenly became stronger. Immediately after, a strange scene appeared. The dragon egg, which was originally a meter in diameter, actually shrank rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had already shrunk to about a foot in diameter. In the next moment, it directly crashed into Qin Sixuan's embrace. Hugging the snow-white dragon egg, Qin Sixuan was a bit dazed. The dragon egg even rubbed against her voluptuous breasts. An extremely friendly emotion came from the dragon egg and quickly entered Qin Sixuan's soul, as if it was giving her a warm greeting. Seeing this scene, the Diamond Dragon King was overjoyed and said, "Ah, young lady, my darling likes you very much. That's great, you can sign a contract with it." Du Ming, who was at the side, was dumbfounded as he muttered to himself, "Heavens, even the dragon egg is fond of beauty." The moment it saw Sixuan's beauty, it actually approved of her. The Diamond Dragon King said, "You guys might not know this, but our dragon race is the race that is the most appreciative. We also like beautiful things the most, especially those beautiful things that can be passed down for a long time. In the outside world, we only know that we like shiny things. In fact, what we like is beauty. Even from the perspective of our dragon race, this young lady's beauty is flawless. Even I am jealous of her. It is very normal for my darling to like her because of this. This is really great." Ji Dong suddenly asked, "Senior Irina, Although your child has yet to hatch, if I'm not wrong, it should already have its own consciousness. It can even change the shape of its eggshell. What's going on? Irina sighed and said, "This is where the mutation lies. Its eggshell is extremely tough, so tough that the Dragon Emperor and I can't do anything about it." Irina sighed and said, "This is where the mutation lies. Its eggshell is extremely tough, to the point that the Dragon Emperor and I can't do anything about it. We can't break it by force. After so many years, this treasure of mine has developed its own consciousness. Although it can't break out of its shell, it can release its power through the eggshell. Although I don't want to admit it, I have to tell you that my treasure's eggshell is an excellent weapon for it. Even if it can't be called a divine artifact, it's not far from it. It can change its eggshell into any shape with its own power. Its defensive ability is absolutely capable of resisting elementary and intermediate super-killing technique. If it wasn't for the fact that this eggshell is so difficult to deal with, how could it not hatch? Your Majesty has also asked the Earth Dragon Ancestor to take a look. The Earth Dragon Ancestor said that the only possibility for my child to hatch is to rely on its own power to break out. If it is forced by external forces, it will only hurt it. If not for this, how could I bear to let my darling sign a contract with you humans and leave my side?" As she spoke, the Diamond Dragon King started to cry silently again. Regardless of the race, a mother's love was always the most selfless. The Heavenly Stem holy disciples looked at Chen Sichuan with admiration in their eyes. Even though she said that her helping the Diamond Dragon King to hatch its egg had nothing to do with Jidong, how could Jidong not be a factor in this world? If someone among the Heavenly Stem holy disciples helped the Diamond Dragon King to hatch its child with the Dragon Emperor, there was no doubt that the dragon race would be friendlier toward them. When the others obtained a dragon mount again, they would definitely choose the most powerful giant dragon. Chen Sichuan had sacrificed herself to obtain a powerful giant dragon mount for the sake of the others. Of course, the crowd didn't just owe this favor to her alone. Everyone could tell that she had done this because of Jidong. Not only had she helped Jidong solve the problem at hand, but she had also benefited the Heavenly Stem holy disciples. Everyone asked themselves honestly. Perhaps they might have done the same if they were in Chen Sichuan's shoes, but they definitely wouldn't be like Chen Sichuan, who didn't hesitate at all. Jidong took a step forward and came to Chen Sichuan's side. He grabbed her shoulder and said, "Sichuan, you have to think this through clearly." Chen Sichuan smiled and gently stroked the snow-white, sparkling dragon egg in her arms. The egg seemed to be enjoying it very much, as its surface squirmed slightly. She said, "I've already thought it through very clearly. I think I have the right to decide what my magical beast partner is." Looking at her gentle and calm gaze, Jidong's heart seemed to have been violently tugged on. Although Chen Sichuan's smooth and round skin was separated by her clothes, he could still feel a strong sense of touch. Jidong tightened his grip on her shoulder before he finally let go. Although he didn't say anything, he knew that he owed Chen Sichuan once again. He sighed in his heart. He didn't know when he would be able to repay Chen Sichuan's favor. In fact, Chen Sichuan had thought more than the Heavenly Stem holy disciples. She had decided to form a contract with this dragon egg, not just to help Jidong. When she saw the Diamond Dragon King's gaze, she recalled her background. Back then, the flaming bar was born out of thin air. It absorbed the essence of heaven and earth to form a geocentric red lotus. Heaven and earth were her parents. Over the past few days, she had witnessed Ajin reuniting with the Earth Dragon's grandfather and daughter. Then, she saw the Dragon Emperor, the Fire Dragon King, and the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon's family reunite. Her heart was constantly moved. It was precisely because she had no parents that her feelings were the most profound. Hence, when she saw the Diamond Dragon King's tears, she had already made up her mind to help this mother. Of course, her decision was not made blindly. No one understood the mysteries of the magical elements better than she did. She was at least 60% sure that she could use the power of the contract to help the little fellow hatch. At the same time, she had her own selfish motives. Hatching the Diamond Dragon King's child was not something that could be done overnight. After everyone came to the Dragon Valley, they would all have their own mounts except for her. In this case, no matter where they went in the future, she would be able to monopolize Ji-dong and ride the sacred evolution fire dragon with Ji-dong. This time, she had taken the initiative to help Ji-dong solve his current problem. No matter what, Ji-dong would not reject her to ride with him. "Irina, what's your child's name?" Chen Sichuan asked softly. Irina replied, "Because the child has not hatched yet, we will call it Eggy for the time being. Since you have decided to form a contract with it, I will let you have the right to name our child. I believe that His Majesty will not object to it." It was probably the first time in the entire dragon race that a dragon king would let someone else have the right to name the child that he and the Dragon Emperor had. Moreover, once the little dragon hatched, it would be the direct heir of the Dragon Emperor. Even the sacred evolution fire dragon would only be its backup. Chen Sichuan gently stroked the dragon egg in her hand and smiled. "My name is Sichuan. In that case, let's call it Thinking Movement. I hope that it can break through its shackles soon and move. Irina, is that alright? Thinking Movement? Alright, let's call it Thinking Movement." Irina liked the meaning of the name. She could also tell that since Chen Sichuan had agreed, she would definitely do her best to help her blind the child. The word, Thinking Movement, struck Ji-dong's heart once again. Be it him or the heavenly stem holy disciples, who did not understand the meaning of this word. Thinking Movement, Thinking Movement. He missed Ji-dong. Ji-dong closed his eyes and quietly retreated to the side. He was trying his best to suppress the impulse in his heart. Chapter 452. Chen Sichuan gently stroked the dragon egg in her hand, and a gentle light flashed in her eyes as she said, "Sidong, we are about to begin. Are you willing to form a contract with me?" The round, white, and transparent dragon egg seemed to understand Chen Sichuan's words and quietened down. After a long while, it gently swayed in her hand as if it was nodding. Everyone's eyes were fixated on the dragon egg, especially the Diamond Dragon King. She was the most nervous one. Although there would not be any problems when humans and magical beasts formed a contract, she hoped that during the process of forming the contract, her baby would have a chance to break out of the eggshell. Although the Diamond Dragon King did not say it explicitly, Chen Sichuan and Ji-dong both understood that she had already paid the price for bringing her baby here to make such a request. The price was that Chen Sichuan would have the protection of the Dragon Crown Prince while she was still alive. Of course, this price had to be in quotation marks because the Dragon Crown Prince had to hatch first. A faint light flickered and a cold look appeared on Ji-dong's face. He gradually clenched his fist. No one could disturb the process of forming the contract. Even if he wanted to use his soul to fuse with Chen Sichuan to help her, he could not. This was something that could only be done by Chen Sichuan alone. Chen Sichuan continued to gently stroke the dragon egg in her hand. From her feet, pieces of armor that looked like leaves gradually covered her delicate body. In the end, the armor only covered her wrists and did not go any further to cover her palms. A rich aura of life was continuously released from the eternal armor. The various plants in the Dragon Valley sensed it and quietly released their life force, which resonated with the aura of the eternal armor. At this moment, everyone's pupils contracted, because they could clearly see that the armor around Chen Sichuan's wrist meridians had suddenly contracted inwards. Following that, fresh blood was already flowing out of her wrist meridians. The bright red blood formed a stark contrast with the dark green armor that shone with a crystalline luster. In just 2 breaths' time, the blood that flowed out of Chen Sichuan's wrists had already dyed the dragon egg in her hand red. However, she did not stop the bleeding and continued to let the blood flow. The strange thing was that the dragon egg seemed to be sucking her blood. The blood continued to flow, but not a single drop fell to the ground. It was completely absorbed by the dragon egg. Seeing this, for some reason, Ji Dong suddenly felt very uncomfortable. No matter how unwilling he was to admit it, he knew that this was the feeling of heartache because of Chen Xishuan's blood loss. This feeling made his heart tighten, and he held his breath. If not for the fact that his rationality told him not to stop it, he would have already rushed forward. Normally, a human and a magical beast only needed a drop of blood to activate the magic circle. Even if it was a little more difficult to sign a contract with a magical beast's egg, it would not require more than 10 drops of blood. At this time, Chen Xishuan was using a large amount of her blood to fuse with the dragon egg. For her, other than getting closer to this magical beast partner of hers, there was no benefit. However, after the dragon egg absorbed a large amount of her blood, it could be fully nourished by the magic power and life energy contained in her blood. One must know that the blood of a magician who cultivated magic power and possessed extreme magic power was completely different from that of an ordinary person. Her blood was pure and full of energy, just like a flowing liquid of energy. It also contained Chen Xishuan's spiritual will and human imprint. Ji Dong really did not want Chen Xishuan to make such a huge sacrifice to help him. However, he clearly understood that what Chen Xishuan was doing now was just like what he had done when he was incubating the sprout platform and the 5-grain liquor. This was the best opportunity, and it was also the most beneficial for the baby dragon in the dragon egg. Seeing this scene before her, the Diamond Dragon King's huge eyes clearly showed gratitude. At this moment, she no longer had any worries. Chen Xishuan was paying such a huge price for her child. How could she not be touched? As a wood element magician, she relied on life energy. However, at this time, Chen Xishuan's blood loss was equivalent to a large consumption of her life energy and vitality. Even with the help of the eternal armor, her vitality would definitely be greatly damaged. If she lost too much blood, the eternal armor could save her life, but it would not affect the reduction of her lifespan. In fact, Chen Xishuan's thinking was very simple. To her, there was no point in having too much life energy. If Ji Dong completed the Flaming Bar's wish and committed suicide 10 years after the Flaming Bar's death, then what was the point of her, the genuine owner of the Flaming Bar, living? Therefore, at this moment, she wholeheartedly wanted to help the dragon egg in her hand. After all, there was not much point in leaving too much life energy. If Ji Dong could say those 3 words to her, then she would consider this. This kindness was continuously absorbed by the dragon egg along with her blood. At the same time, this kindness also touched everyone present. First would Heavenly Stem Holy Disciple Yao Qianshu could not help but sigh softly. As expected of our wood element magician, Xishuan loves life. She is not only helping Ji Dong. At the same time, she is also helping this little life to truly survive. This kindness is worthy of the title of First Wood Holy Disciple. Although Fury did not say anything, he nodded silently. Then, he looked at the extremely nervous Ji Dong and sighed in his heart. Little junior brother, Xishuan is really a good girl. It seems that I have to find a way to help her. If you can have her as your wife, you will be much happier in the future. On the contrary, Ji Dong did not think of anything at this time because his mind was a little blank. Occasionally, some images flashed through his mind, and it turned out that the Flaming Bar had used the lotus seed of the natal red lotus for him. Ji Dong's eyes began to moisten a little. Looking at the blood that flowed continuously from Chen Xishuan's wrist, he knew that although he could not accept her feelings, he would probably not be able to say such words of rejection to hurt her in the future. How could he bear to hurt such a good girl again? The blood continued to flow, and Chen Xishuan's pretty face became paler and paler. However, her hand that was constantly bleeding was still firm as it held the dragon egg. The Diamond Dragon King clenched her teeth and stared at the dragon egg in Chen Xishuan's hand. More than once, she wanted to stop Chen Xishuan from continuing, but for the sake of her child, she could not open her mouth. The white light emitted by the dragon egg began to become more and more intense. The white light also gradually began to change color, from pure white to light yellow, and then from light yellow to light gold. Chen Xishuan's vision began to blur, but the smile on her perfect face remained. In the eyes of everyone else, this could be said to be the most beautiful smile in the world. A sense of weakness continued to invade her brain, but she did not stop. She could feel the small heart in the dragon egg in her hand beating more and more vigorously. This proved that her blood was useful to it. With the help of the core of life, the eternal armor had already recovered the life force contained in it. However, even though it was a divine weapon, it could not go against Chen Xishuan's will. All it could do was to continuously inject life force into Chen Xishuan's body to maintain her life. It also tried its best to stimulate her body's hematopoietic function to produce more blood. However, no matter what, its help could not withstand Chen Xishuan's squandering. "No, I can't continue like this." Ji Dong took a step forward. Even if he had to break the contract and cause Chen Xishuan to fail, he would not hesitate. If this went on, even if Chen Xishuan did not die, she would definitely suffer irreparable injuries. At this moment, the faint golden light emitted by the dragon egg instantly turned into an intense golden light. Two beams of golden light shot out from the dragon egg at the same time and accurately hit the wrist of Chen Xishuan's eternal armor. They sealed her open wound and stopped the blood from flowing out. The blood that had covered the dragon egg was also quickly absorbed. However, when the dragon egg appeared in front of everyone again, it was no longer the original white. Instead, it was a brilliant gold. In Chen Xishuan's arms, it was like a large golden ball. It was the dragon egg that had sealed Chen Xishuan's wound. At this moment, the golden light emitted by the dragon egg formed a faintly discernible symbol in the air. It floated in front of Chen Xishuan and went straight for her forehead. Chen Xishuan was stunned. This was because she had not released the contract yet. Why did the dragon egg release a contract-like symbol toward her? The equality contract signed with a magical beast required both parties to establish it together. What was it trying to do? Chen Xishuan did not understand, but that did not mean that the Diamond Dragon King did not understand. The Diamond Dragon King almost shouted in shock, "No, child, how can you use a master-slave contract?" However, it was a step too late. The difference between the contract symbols was very small. Even Chen Xishuan, who had reincarnated in the flaming bar, could not see it clearly, let alone the Diamond Dragon King. By the time she cried out in shock, the golden light had already accurately entered the space between Chen Xishuan's eyebrows. An intense golden light was like a bridge, connecting the dragon egg and Chen Xishuan's eyebrows. The Diamond Dragon King's expression fluctuated violently. Her emotions were obviously unstable, but she also knew that there was nothing she could do at this moment. Once the contract had been established, it could not be interrupted. This was especially true for a master-slave contract like this. Once it was interrupted, Chen Xishuan, who was the master, would not be able to do anything. However, the dragon egg on the side of the slave might be severely injured or even die immediately. The reason why only a one-sided contract was needed was because of this master-slave contract. The master-slave contract was different from the equality contract. The two parties who signed the equality contract had a cooperative and partnership relationship. On the other hand, although the master-slave contract was not as harsh as the master-slave contract, there was still a difference between the master and the slave. The master could use the power of the contract to order the slave. In other words, Chen Xishuan had complete control. In the future, no matter what request she made to the Dragon Clan Crown Prince, it would not be able to refuse. Chen Xishuan did not hesitate to release her blood. The one who was most touched was not the heavenly stem saint, but the person involved. The Dragon Clan was also a highly intelligent race. The richness of their emotions was no less than that of humans. The dragon egg had absorbed so much of Chen Xishuan's blood, how could it not be moved? What it did was change the contract from equal to master and slave. Chen Sichuan didn't even have a chance to object before the contract was completed. Chen Sichuan's eyes revealed a gentle light. She muttered, "Little fool, why do you have to do this? Isn't it better for us to be equal?" The dragon egg transmitted cheerful and excited emotions to her. Chen Sichuan let out a soft sigh and closed her eyes. The dense golden light was constantly communicating with each other. The dragon egg started to tremble continuously in Chen Sichuan's hands. Suddenly, a bulge appeared on top of the dragon egg, as if it was about to burst out. However, the golden dragon egg's eggshell was very tough. Although the impact was fierce, it was still forcibly blocked. The Diamond Dragon King's emotions gradually stabilized. It sighed secretly. Some things were destined. It had brought its child here today to take advantage of her. Who would have thought that the final outcome would be like this? This perfect girl had sacrificed so much for its child. Its baby did not wait for it to repay this favor. Instead, it repaid it through the contract. Although the Dragon Crown Prince did not break through the eggshell just now, the Diamond Dragon King could clearly feel that its child's life force was at least a few times stronger than before. It was completely certain that even if its child could not hatch from the eggshell in the future, its child would never die prematurely in the eggshell through the power of Chen Sichuan's contract and the huge life force contained in her blood. Its life force would definitely not be less than that of an ordinary dragon. No matter what, this was already a great thing. What more could it ask for? Now, it should be looking forward to the day when its child would really be able to emerge from the eggshell. After thinking this through, the Diamond Dragon King gradually felt relieved about the master-slave contract. It focused all its attention on its child's life force fluctuations. The golden color gradually spread to Chen Sichuan's entire body through the contract symbol on her forehead. It covered her entire body, causing her to look like the dragon egg in her hand. Both of them had become pure gold. At this moment they looked like strange statues. The contract had already begun to be completed. At this moment, it was the exchange of emotions and memories between the human and the magical beast. In a human's life, there was only one chance to conclude a contract. The power of this contract could connect the souls of a human and a magical beast to a certain extent. Chapter 453. The power of the contract could connect the souls of humans and magical beasts, and allow them to communicate with each other smoothly. One could imagine how much magic it contained. This power wouldn't change anything for humans, but for most magical beasts, it was extremely beneficial. This benefit was that through the power of the contract, magical beasts could quickly grow and become stronger in a short period of time. It was also because of this benefit that magical beasts were willing to mate with demon masters. Of course, this also depended on whether or not both parties were satisfied with each other. The stronger the magical beast, the harsher the requirements. After the contract was completed, the magical beast's future strength was closely related to its human partner. The strength of the magical beast that the human contracted with would also determine the human's overall strength in battle. Therefore, for a demon master who could reach the 6th crown, forming a contract with a magical beast was one of the most important things in their entire cultivation process. Ji Dong stood quietly only 10 meters away from Chen Sichuan. He quietly released his mental power and formed a soul force field around Chen Sichuan's body. He could feel the changes in her soul at all times. If anything happened, he would immediately intervene and save Chen Sichuan. Ji Dong's worry was not groundless. Under normal circumstances, there would not be any danger for humans to sign a contract with magical beasts. However, the situation in front of him was obviously not normal. Chen Sichuan had lost a lot of blood and had fallen into an extremely weak state. When signing the contract, she and the dragon egg would bear a huge impact of the contract energy. It was hard to say whether her current physical condition could withstand this energy impact. Although it was during the contract process, if one of them fell unconscious, the other would have the ability to instantly devour everything of the other party. Although Ji Dong believed that the Dragon Prince would not do this, he still had to be careful. Moreover, if she fell unconscious at this time, the damage to Chen Xishuan would be great. The impact of the magic was very likely to cause great damage to her. The power of the contract belonged to the scope of mental power, and the eternal armor could not help her at this time. Chen Xishuan's situation was indeed very bad. Although she no longer lost blood, she had lost a lot of blood before. The strong feeling of weakness caused her to fall into a semi-conscious state at the beginning of the contract signing ceremony. She could really fall into a coma at any time. At this time, it showed the strength of the flaming bar's divine sense. Divine sense and soul were two completely different concepts. Although in Chen Xishuan's soul, there was only the consciousness of the flaming bar left, and the divine sense was only a tiny trace. However, it was this trace of divine sense that made Chen Xishuan's sea of soul extremely firm. Although the feeling of weakness was strong, it could not really make her fall into a coma. Although the impact of the power of the contract gave her a splitting headache, she managed to endure it in the end. Gradually, the golden light began to spread from Chen Xishuan and the dragon egg, forming a golden halo around their bodies. They gradually returned to their original appearances. Chen Xishuan was still the perfect Chen Xishuan, and the dragon egg had also returned to its crystal-clear white color. However, under the light, something seemed to be moving in the dragon egg. If there was anything different about the dragon egg compared to before, it would be that the light it released was the same white as its body. After the contract was signed, the light turned pale gold. Moreover, everyone could clearly feel that the vitality contained in the dragon egg had reached an extremely terrifying level. Within this range of the dragon egg, the vitality was so huge that it even exceeded that of the Dragon Emperor. This did not mean that the Dragon Crown Prince's vitality could surpass his father's, but because of the restraint of the eggshell, the huge vitality it contained could only be compressed in the eggshell and could not be released. Naturally, the density of the vitality was quite high. As a dragon, its vitality was much stronger than that of humans. After absorbing Chen Xishuan's blood, the vitality along with the thorn rose exponentially. At this time, this round dragon egg was emitting a pale golden light. Even first-wood holy disciple Yao Qianshu could not help but be speechless. The terrifying vitality was already close to the concentration of Ji Dong's core of life. The golden halo surrounding Chen Xishuan and the dragon egg finally turned into a golden symbol and disappeared quietly. The next moment, Chen Xishuan had already fallen to the ground with the dragon egg in her arms. She had finally fallen unconscious. Even so, she hugged the dragon egg tightly and did not relax at all. When her body fell to the ground, she still used her body to protect the dragon egg from rolling to the ground. Ji Dong took a big stride forward and picked Chen Xishuan up from the ground. He did not say anything, but the heartache continued to wreak havoc in his heart. Looking at Chen Xishuan's pretty face, which was as pale as a piece of paper, his heart was pounding fiercely again and again. Senior Diamond Dragon King, I have to take care of Xishuan first. Your child has just signed the contract, so it's better for him to stay by Xishuan's side. This time, Ji Dong did not call the Diamond Dragon King by his name. His tone was even colder. He was suppressing the anger in his heart. The Diamond Dragon King nodded gently and said, "I'm sorry, Ji Dong. I've caused you trouble. I'll take my leave first." There was no point in saying anything else now. What she needed to do was to repay the favor. Spreading her wings, the Diamond Dragon King took one last look at the child that was tightly held in Chen Xishuan's arms. Then, she flew out of the cave. She no longer had any regrets. Regardless of whether the child could hatch or not, being able to obtain the help of such a human partner through the contract was already the best outcome for her child. Just as Miao Miao was about to go into the cave to check on Chen Xishuan, she was stopped by Fury. He said, "Don't disturb them. Nothing will happen with Ji-dong around. Let them be alone. Sichuan is a good girl. I really hope that she and little brother will have a good ending. Meow Meow rolled her eyes at him and said, That's right. Sichuan is a good girl. I'm a she-devil. That's enough. After saying that, she rushed out of the cave without looking back. Fury was taken aback by Meow Meow's rebuke. Beside him, Yao Qianshu burst into laughter and said, Boss Fury, it's not right to praise another woman in front of a woman, especially one who is interested in you. Fury snorted coldly and said, If it's not right, then it's not right. Come, practice with me. Yao Qianshu smiled bitterly and said, You don't have to do this every time. Ji-dong carried Chen Sichuan all the way to the inner cave. He found a flat and dry place to put her down. In order to make her more comfortable, he helped her remove the armor of eternity from her body. There were still 2 shocking scars on Chen Sichuan's wrist. The pain in Ji-dong's heart intensified. He took a deep breath and carefully removed the core of life from Chen Sichuan's neck. Accidentally, his fingers came into contact with the skin on her neck. The smooth and soft feeling made Ji-dong's heart skip a beat. The sunlight subconsciously fell on Chen Sichuan's towering peaks, even when she was lying down. He was at the age where he was full of vigor and vigor. It would be strange if he said that he didn't have any impulses in his heart. Ji-dong almost immediately slapped himself. He forcibly shifted his gaze to Chen Sichuan's hands and channeled mana into the core of life. A faint green light was released from the core of life along with a vast amount of life energy. In fact, even if Ji-dong didn't intentionally activate it, with the core of life around Chen Sichuan's neck, the wound on her wrist would recover in a short time. The faint green light was channeled into the wounds on Chen Sichuan's wrist. The wounds that had been sealed by the dragon egg immediately began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although Chen Sichuan's face was pale, Prince Sidong, who was in the dragon egg, managed to seal the blood vessels on her wrists in time. In the end, the degree of blood loss was controlled and Chen Sichuan's body was not too seriously injured. After carefully laying Chen Sichuan's body down, Ji-dong sighed in his heart. It seemed that he was destined to have a deeper and deeper entanglement with this girl. Oh Sichuan, Sichuan, do you know that it's impossible between us? I will never betray my flaming bar. How can I repay you for what you have done to me? Ji-dong looked at Chen Sichuan and sat quietly beside her. Chen Sichuan's hands were no longer hugging the dragon egg because Ji-dong had pried them apart to treat her wounds. However, the funny thing was that the dragon egg was also the Prince Sidong's will. The eggshell was like a suction cup and was attached to Chen Sichuan's body. At this moment, it was resting in her arms with a faint golden halo. Ji-dong leaned against the stone wall behind him and didn't look at Chen Sichuan anymore, because he didn't dare to look at her too much. Chen Sichuan was so perfect. He was afraid that he would do something that he would regret if he looked at her too much. Ji-dong was sure that if he had met Chen Sichuan instead of the flaming bar, he would have fallen in love with her without hesitation. To be precise, what kind of man would refuse to fall in love with this perfect girl? None. Ji-dong could make this judgment. Half a year later, with a pft, Ji-dong spat out a mouthful of blood. He leaned against the entrance of the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples' cave while panting heavily. His expression was a little mischievous. There was indignation, amusement, and even joy and helplessness on his face. He muttered to himself, This fellow, the Dragon Emperor, is taking revenge on me. He's so ruthless every time. Didn't I just make him suffer a little in our first fight? Yet, he's taking revenge on me like this. He really doesn't have any self-restraint as an emperor at all. After half a year had passed, the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples all had their own mounts as they wished. After discussing with the Dragon Emperor and the Dragon Kings, the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples finally chose rank 8 or rank 9 giant dragons. Those with 7 crowns and above chose rank 9, while Lon Bauer, Du Exener, and Du Ming chose rank 8. Of course, there was a reason why they did this. This was because the higher the level of the giant dragon, the more fixed its abilities were, and it was harder to change them. If they were to directly sign a contract with a rank 10 giant dragon, although the giant dragon would agree under the pressure of the dragon kings, it would also displease the giant dragon due to the difference in strength between the two parties. How could they cooperate perfectly with the heavenly stem holy disciples? After magical beasts and humans formed a contract, what they needed the most was a process of growing up together. Only after experiencing this process would they truly have a tacit understanding with each other and establish deep feelings for each other. This required room for growth. Therefore, the heavenly stem holy disciples did not choose a rank 10 giant dragon, but instead chose the rank 9 and rank 8 with the most potential. Right now, among all the heavenly stem holy disciples, other than Audiobook, who was still awakening his bloodline at the Earth Dragon ancestor's side, all of them already had their own mounts. Of course, this included Chen Sichuan's thoughts. Thinking Dong had formed a master-slave contract with Chen Sichuan, so it was extremely attached to her. No matter what, it would always stick to Chen Sichuan, causing Chen Sichuan to have no choice but to hug it. However, as time passed, Chen Sichuan gradually discovered the powerful abilities of this egg-shaped thinking Dong. She was not an ordinary person, she was the flaming bar that was once a second-level god. After carefully inspecting thinking Dong's situation, and even using that strand of divine sense to scan it, Chen Sichuan came to the conclusion that not only would thinking Dong be able to hatch in the near future, even before it hatched, it would also be able to become a powerful ally with her. As for what this ally was, she did not tell anyone else. She wanted to keep this secret for future battles and use this ally to help the man she loved. For the past half a year, the heavenly stem holy disciples had been training hard without rest. Due to the absence of Audiobook, Ji-dong could only explain the wonders of the 5 elements cycle formation to everyone, as well as teach them how to use it. Previously, when they were faced with a crisis, Ji-dong had temporarily used his soul power to form a cycle with the heavenly stem holy disciples. Once Audiobook returned, it would be a piece of cake for them to set up the 5 elements cycle formation. In this aspect, the dragon tribe was extremely cooperative, to the point that Ji-dong's sparring partner was the dragon monarch. The dragon monarch only wanted to be Ji-dong's sparring partner, while the 4 dragon kings and some 10th-level giant dragons were a nightmare for the other heavenly stem holy disciples. Facing sparring partners who were stronger than them, how could the talented heavenly stem holy disciples not be stimulated to their potential? Of course, what they had to endure in the process of stimulation was their own problem. This was definitely a pain and joy, and it was a joy that they could not feel now. Chapter 454. The one who suffered the most was undoubtedly Ji-dong himself. On the first day he came to the Dragon Valley, he had injured the Dragon Emperor. In the past 6 months, the Dragon Emperor had sincerely accompanied Ji-dong in actual combat. Even though the Dragon Emperor had a sense of propriety, it was still the Dragon Emperor's strength. Moreover, in order to properly help Ji-dong, the Dragon Emperor had specially said that he could accompany Ji-dong in actual combat twice a day. The results of the 2 actual combat matches had resulted. Now, Chen Sichuan had returned the core of life to Ji-dong, and Ji-dong had also used up a whole bottle of the 1,000-year source of life in the past 6 months. It should be known that a drop of the source of life could save a person's life. Of course, while enduring the great pain, Ji-dong's actual combat ability had also improved by leaps and bounds. Facing the training of a saint-level powerhouse, it could be said that he had squeezed out all his potential as much as possible with only the 7 crowns of magic power. Throughout the entire process of cultivation, although Ji-dong had endured great pain, he would gain something from every actual combat. At the beginning of the battle with the Dragon Emperor, as long as the Dragon Emperor used his abnormal dragon drill tyrannical demonic domain, Ji-dong would immediately be beaten up and thrown out of the Dragon Emperor's cave mansion. Now, although the Dragon Emperor's dragon drill tyrannical demonic domain could still bring great trouble to Ji Dong, it was not enough to completely affect the process of his combat. In the past 6 months, the actual combat ability of Ji Dong could not be described with numbers. However, in the past 6 months, his magic power had also improved by leaps and bounds. Now, it had risen to level 79. Although he had just entered level 79, he was only a step away from level 80 and the 8 crowns of magic power. Ji Dong cultivated the yin and yang dual fire. Once he entered the 8 crowns of magic power, his ultimate magic power and yin-yang dual fire combination skill would be able to truly contend with a 9-crown demon master. He might even be stronger than an ordinary 9-crown demon master. At least, Ji Dong was confident that he could challenge Fatty Zhou Xiaoxiao one-on-one after he obtained the demonic domain. Not only had his magic power increased rapidly, but what surprised Ji Dong the most was the improvement of his deity's strike. It had risen from the 4th realm to the 5th realm. This was a very natural thing. In the battle with the Dragon Emperor, besides the deity strike, Ji Dong had no other means that could pose a threat to the Dragon Emperor. He had been constantly using the deity strike in actual combat every day, so how could his deity strike not improve? Fury had finally become the first person among the heavenly stem saints to break through to the 8th crown. However, his situation also clearly told Ji Dong that once his magic power broke through to the 8th crown, it would be extremely difficult to advance any further. At the beginning of half a year of cultivation, Fury had already reached the 8th crown. Every day, he was constantly sparring with the Dragon Kings and training day and night. But now, his magic power was only at level 81, and there was still a certain gap between him and level 82. In other words, Ji Dong's magic power was about to catch up to Fury's. The rich magic power in the Dragon Valley was of great help to the heavenly stem saints. The rich magic elements in the Dragon Valley were of great help to the heavenly stem saint. After continuous battles every day, they naturally needed to constantly cultivate and replenish their magic power. The ones who improved the most were Du Ming and Du Exhilarating. Now, both of their magic power had successfully broken through to the 7th crown, and Lan Bao was one step ahead of them. After half a year of hard work, all the heavenly stem saints had reached the 7th crown or above, and Ji Dong was not the only one who was close to the 8th crown. Miao Miao, Yao Qianshu, and Lang Tianyi's cultivation had also reached level 78. Previously, their magic power was no less than Ji Dong's, and during this period of time, they had been constantly cultivating, but their magic power had been surpassed by Ji Dong. This proved how badly Ji Dong had been destroyed by the Dragon Emperor every day for the past 6 months. Woo woo! The sudden sound brought Ji Dong back to his senses. He did not need to look to know who had come. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon appeared beside Ji Dong, and the 2 big heads, Maotai and Wuliangye, came over and rubbed Ji Dong's arms on both sides of his body, looking extremely intimate. After returning to the Dragon Valley, they did not stay in the core of life again. In the past 6 months, they had been playing like crazy, causing trouble everywhere in the Dragon Valley every day. That's right, they were causing trouble. These 2 little fellows were extremely belligerent. Most of the time, they had been staying in the core of life to repair themselves, so their congenital deficiencies were not obvious. Now that they had returned to the Dragon Valley, they had caused a huge commotion. The ordinary dragons did not have much trouble with the Maotai and Wuliangye, but the 10th grade dragons were out of luck. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon's favorite thing to do every day was to challenge them. The Dragon Emperor had already announced the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon's identity to all the clansmen on the first day of its return. Before Sidong hatched, the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon was most likely to become the next Dragon Emperor. No one dared to offend it. Even the few Dragon Kings in the Dragon Tribe were inferior to it. Hence, when the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon challenged the 10th grade dragons, none of them dared to refuse. In the beginning, these 10th grade dragons did not dare to go all out, for fear that they would injure the sacred evolution fire dragon. However, they soon realized that even if they went all out, they would still be at a disadvantage when facing the sacred evolution fire dragon. The sacred evolution fire dragon was only a 9th grade dragon, but the Maotai and Wuliangye were like Ji-Dong's battles with the Fiend Masters. Its ability to challenge those of a higher level was undeniable. Furthermore, this fellow attacked just like how its father, the Dragon Emperor, had dealt with Ji-Dong. Although it did hold back, it did not hold back much. Over the past 6 months, almost all the 10th grade dragons in the Dragon Valley had been defeated by it. Now, there was no need to be nervous when one of the 10th grade dragons was missing some scales or had burn marks. It was obvious that this pitiful dragon had just been challenged by the sacred evolution fire dragon with the Maotai and Wuliangye. The 4 dragon kings had already received countless complaints from the 10th grade dragons, but they were all suppressed by them. It was not easy for the Dragon Emperor's child to be alive and kicking. Furthermore, it was so talented. Why would they restrain it? Fortunately, the sacred evolution fire dragon had something that made the 10th grade dragons feel relieved. It never challenged the sacred evolution fire dragon at night. On the first day they returned to the Dragon Valley, the Maotai and Wuliangye reluctantly stayed with their parents for a night. On the second day, they could not wait to return to Ji-Dong and Qin Sixuan's side. Yes, it was Ji-Dong and Qin Sixuan. Ji-Dong was extremely helpless about this. He did not know if it was because Qin Sixuan had always been carrying the core of life, but the sacred evolution fire dragon was not only very attached to Ji-Dong, but also to Qin Sixuan. Since it was not going back to the core of life, it made a request that Ji-Dong and Qin Sixuan be by its side at night. In fact, this was not a big deal. After all, everyone was cultivating in the same cave. At most, Ji-Dong and Qin Sixuan would be a little closer to each other when they cultivated at night. The sacred evolution fire dragon was more than 15 meters long, so it had no problem separating them. However, what amused Ji-Dong and Qin Sixuan was that the sacred evolution fire dragon and Si-Dong were actually jealous because of Qin Sixuan. The Diamond Dragon King told Qin Sixuan that Si-Dong was also a girl. Just like the sacred evolution fire dragon and the sacred evolution fire dragon, Si-Dong had always been in Qin Sixuan's arms. When the sacred evolution fire dragon returned on the first night, it tried to get close to Qin Sixuan, but it was strongly resisted by Si-Dong. Although Si-Dong did not hatch successfully, she turned her body into a huge shield and stood between the sacred evolution fire dragon and Qin Sixuan. She refused to let the Maotai and Wuliangye get close to her. Maotai and Wuliangye had bad tempers to begin with. They did not care whether she was their sister or not. In an instant they started fighting. It was at that time that Ji-Dong saw how powerful Si-Dong was. Si-Dong was born earlier than the sacred evolution fire dragon, so she was the older sister. Although she had not hatched yet, after forming a contract with Qin Sixuan, her ability to transform had become even stronger. Relying on her constant transformation, she did not let the Maotai and Wuliangye get close to Qin Sixuan during the 2-hour battle. In the end, the Maotai and Wuliangye even attacked in anger, but Si-Dong blocked them. Of course, they were connected by blood after all. The Maotai and Wuliangye could not launch the most powerful and fatal attack. Even so, Si-Dong in the dragon egg state had already displayed her powerful ability. For the first time, Ji-Dong felt that it was not a mistake for Qin Sixuan to sign a contract with the Dragon Clan's chief crown princess. In the end, both sides came to a compromise. Si-Dong allowed the sacred evolution fire dragon to get close to Qin Sixuan, but was not allowed to touch her body. The sacred evolution fire dragon had a bad temper, but in the end it tolerated it. As for how they communicated with Si-Dong, Ji-Dong did not know, and neither did Qin Sixuan. The sacred evolution fire dragon only sent one message to Ji-Dong. This was a secret between the two sisters. Ouch, be gentle. Jidong cried out in pain. The Maotai and Wulyangye touched his wound, causing his body to twitch slightly. Even with his phoenix dance dragon snake transformation, he was injured, so the pain was naturally more intense than that of an ordinary person. The Maotai and Wulyangye raised their heads at almost the same time and looked at the sky above the Dragon Valley. Their eyes were filled with anger, obviously blaming their father for being too ruthless. Jidong stroked their big heads and smiled. It's not a bad thing for the Dragon Emperor to be stricter with me. At least, in the past 6 months, my cultivation has grown the fastest. When I break through to the 8 crowns and have my own demon realm, I think I won't be in such a sorry state. Woo-woo. The Maotai and Wulyangye snorted at the same time. Jidong laughed. That won't do. That's your father. How can you fight with your father? The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon was telling him that it wanted to face the Dragon Emperor with Jidong next time and participate in actual combat. A faint smile appeared on Jidong's face. He thought to himself, when I break through to the 8 crowns, if I really have the Maotai and Wulyangye, I won't be able to defeat the Dragon Emperor, but it won't be easy for the Dragon Emperor to beat me up again. Ever since Jidong's deity Killing Strike reached the 5th level, even the Dragon Emperor wouldn't be willing to be touched by him. The power of the deity Killing Strike became more and more obvious as his cultivation increased. Jidong had a clear feeling that when his deity Killing Strike reached the 6th level, he might be able to learn a skill exclusive to the deity Killing Strike, just like the deity Attraction. At that time, even the Dragon Emperor would have to be wary of him. However, after breaking through to the 5th level, he didn't feel that his deity Killing Strike had any improvement. This skill required accumulation and constant comprehension in actual combat. Fortunately, he now had the Dragon Emperor, an almost perfect sparring partner. Jidong even thought that after Ah Jin's dragon bloodline was fully awakened, he should also find the Earth Dragon ancestor to spar with him. He wanted to feel the immense pressure of a peak martial saint expert. This would definitely be beneficial to him. He would also be able to adapt to the pressure of the dark heavenly secrets that he would have to face in the future. Of course, these were all in the future. Before breaking through to the 8 champions, Jidong wouldn't find himself this kind of trouble. Although he was confident, he wouldn't be arrogant. Just as Jidong was thinking about what method he should use to face the Dragon Emperor in the next actual combat, footsteps came from behind him. Jidong didn't need to look back to know who those familiar footsteps belonged to. They were elegant and calm. Who else could it be other than Qin Sichuan? Sichuan, what's the matter? Jidong didn't look back and asked calmly. Qin Sichuan looked at Jidong's broad back and couldn't help but reveal a faint smile. Reality proved that Jidong wasn't a cold-blooded person after all. Ever since she and Sidong had formed a contract, Jidong's attitude towards her had obviously changed. Although he couldn't say that he had accepted her, at least he didn't explicitly reject her. His attitude towards her was also not as cold as before. Qin Sichuan wasn't afraid that Jidong's attitude towards her was bad. What she was most afraid of was that no matter what she did, Jidong wouldn't react. At least for now, everything that Jidong had done wasn't ineffective. Although there was still a long way to go to change Jidong's feelings from the flaming bar to her, at least for now, there was still a chance. Teacher Jidong, do you still remember what you promised me half a year ago? I'm afraid that we have to set off now. Qin Sichuan said with a smile. Jidong stared blankly for a moment. For the past 6 months, he had been completely immersed in cultivation and actual combat. He had indeed forgotten about what had happened half a year ago. Now that Qin Sichuan had reminded him of Qin Sichuan's engagement, he didn't know why, but when he thought that Qin Sichuan was someone else's fiancée, he felt a little uncomfortable. Chapter 455. The power of the contract could connect the souls of humans and magical beasts, and allow them to communicate with each other smoothly. One could imagine how much magic it contained. This power wouldn't change anything for humans, but for most magical beasts, it was extremely beneficial. This benefit was that through the power of the contract, magical beasts could quickly grow and become stronger in a short period of time. It was also because of this benefit that magical beasts were willing to mate with demon masters. Of course, this also depended on whether or not both parties were satisfied with each other. The stronger the magical beast, the harsher the requirements. After the contract was completed, the magical beast's future strength was closely related to its human partner. The strength of the magical beast that the human contracted with would also determine the human's overall strength in battle. Therefore, for a demon master who could reach the 6th crown, forming a contract with a magical beast was one of the most important things in their entire cultivation process. Ji Dong stood quietly only 10 meters away from Chen Xishuan. He quietly released his mental power and formed a soul force field around Chen Xishuan's body. He could feel the changes in her soul at all times. If anything happened, he would immediately intervene and save Chen Xishuan. Ji Dong's worry was not groundless. Under normal circumstances, there would not be any danger for humans to sign a contract with magical beasts. However, the situation in front of him was obviously not normal. Chen Xishuan had lost a lot of blood and had fallen into an extremely weak state. When signing the contract, she and the dragon egg would bear a huge impact of the contract energy. It was hard to say whether her current physical condition could withstand this energy impact. Although it was during the contract process, if one of them fell unconscious, the other would have the ability to instantly devour everything of the other party. Although Ji Dong believed that the Dragon Prince would not do this, he still had to be careful. Moreover, if she fell unconscious at this time, the damage to Chen Xishuan would be great. The impact of the magic was very likely to cause great damage to her. The power of the contract belonged to the scope of mental power, and the eternal armor could not help her at this time. Chen Xishuan's situation was indeed very bad. Although she no longer lost blood, she had lost a lot of blood before. The strong feeling of weakness caused her to fall into a semi-conscious state at the beginning of the contract signing ceremony. She could really fall into a coma at any time. At this time, it showed the strength of the flaming bar's divine sense. Divine sense and soul were two completely different concepts. Although in Chen Xishuan's soul, there was only the consciousness of the flaming bar left, and the divine sense was only a tiny trace. However, it was this trace of divine sense that made Chen Xishuan's sea of soul extremely firm. Although the feeling of weakness was strong, it could not really make her fall into a coma. Although the impact of the power of the contract gave her a splitting headache, she managed to endure it in the end. Gradually, the golden light began to spread from Chen Xishuan and the dragon egg, forming a golden halo around their bodies. They gradually returned to their original appearances. Chen Xishuan was still the perfect Chen Xishuan, and the dragon egg had also returned to its crystal-clear white color. However, under the light, something seemed to be moving in the dragon egg. If there was anything different about the dragon egg compared to before, it would be that the light it released was the same white as its body. After the contract was signed, the light turned pale gold. Moreover, everyone could clearly feel that the vitality contained in the dragon egg had reached an extremely terrifying level. Within this range of the dragon egg, the vitality was so huge that it even exceeded that of the Dragon Emperor. This did not mean that the Dragon Crown Prince's vitality could surpass his father's, but because of the restraint of the eggshell, the huge vitality it contained could only be compressed in the eggshell and could not be released. Naturally, the density of the vitality was quite high. As a dragon, its vitality was much stronger than that of humans. After absorbing Chen Xishuan's blood, the vitality along with the thorn rose exponentially. At this time, this round dragon egg was emitting a pale golden light. Even first-wood holy disciple Yao Qianshu could not help but be speechless. The terrifying vitality was already close to the concentration of Ji Dong's core of life. The golden halo surrounding Qin Sichuan and the dragon egg finally turned into a golden symbol and disappeared quietly. The next moment, Qin Sichuan had already fallen to the ground with the dragon egg in her arms. She had finally fallen unconscious. Even so, she hugged the dragon egg tightly and did not relax at all. When her body fell to the ground, she still used her body to protect the dragon egg from rolling to the ground. Ji Dong rushed forward and picked Qin Sichuan up from the ground. He did not say anything, but the pain in his heart continued to wreak havoc in his heart. Looking at Qin Sichuan's pretty face, which was as pale as a piece of paper, his heart was pounding fiercely again and again. Senior Diamond Dragon King, I have to take care of Sichuan first. Your child has just signed the contract, so it's better for him to stay by Sichuan's side. This time, Ji Dong did not call the Diamond Dragon King by his name. His tone was even colder. He was suppressing the anger in his heart. The Diamond Dragon King nodded gently and said, I'm sorry, Ji Dong. I've caused you trouble. I'll take my leave first. There was no point in saying anything else now. What she needed to do was to repay the favor. Spreading her wings, the Diamond Dragon King took one last look at the child that was tightly held in Qin Sichuan's arms. Then, she flew out of the cave. She no longer had any regrets. Regardless of whether the child could hatch or not, being able to obtain the help of such a human partner through the contract was already the best outcome for her child. Just as Meow Meow was about to go into the cave to check on Qin Sichuan, she was stopped by Fury. He said, Don't disturb them. Nothing will happen with Ji Dong around. Let them be alone. Sichuan is a good girl. I really hope that she and little brother will have a good ending. Meow Meow rolled her eyes at him and said, That's right. Sichuan is a good girl. I'm a she-devil. That's enough. After saying that, she rushed out of the cave without looking back. Fury was stunned by Meow Meow's rebuke. Yao Qianshu, who was beside him, laughed and said, Boss Fury, it's not right to praise another woman in front of a woman who is interested in you. Fury snorted coldly and said, If it's not right, then it's not right. Come, practice with me. Yao Qianshu smiled bitterly and said, You don't have to do this every time. Ji Dong carried Qin Sichuan all the way to the inner cave. He found a flat and dry place to put her down. In order to make her more comfortable, he helped her remove the armor of eternity from her body. There were still 2 shocking scars on Qin Sichuan's wrist. The pain in Ji Dong's heart intensified. He took a deep breath and carefully removed the core of life from Qin Sichuan's neck. Accidentally, his fingers came into contact with the skin on her neck. The smooth and soft feeling made Ji Dong's heart skip a beat. The sunlight subconsciously fell on Qin Sichuan's towering peaks, even when she was lying down. He was at the age where he was full of vigor and vigor. It would be strange if he said that he didn't have any impulses in his heart. Ji Dong almost immediately slapped himself. He forcibly shifted his gaze to Qin Sichuan's hands and channeled mana into the core of life. A faint green light was released from the core of life along with a vast amount of life energy. In fact, even if Ji Dong didn't intentionally activate it, with the core of life around Qin Sichuan's neck, the wound on her wrist would recover in a short time. The faint green light was channeled into the wounds on Qin Sichuan's wrist. The wounds that had been sealed by the dragon egg immediately began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although Qin Sichuan's face was pale, Prince Sidong, who was in the dragon egg, managed to seal the blood vessels on her wrists in time. In the end, the degree of blood loss was controlled and Qin Sichuan's body was not too seriously injured. After carefully laying Qin Sichuan's body down, Ji Dong sighed in his heart. It seemed that he was destined to have a deeper and deeper entanglement with this girl. Oh Sichuan, Sichuan, do you know that it's impossible between us? I will never betray my flaming bar. How can I repay you for what you have done to me? Ji Dong looked at Qin Sichuan and sat quietly beside her. Chen Sichuan's hands were no longer hugging the dragon egg because Ji Dong had pried them apart to treat her wounds. However, the funny thing was that the dragon egg was also the Prince Xidong's will. The eggshell was like a suction cup and was attached to Chen Sichuan's body. At this moment, it was resting in her arms with a faint golden halo. Ji Dong leaned against the stone wall behind him and didn't look at Chen Sichuan anymore, because he didn't dare to look at her too much. Chen Sichuan was so perfect. He was afraid that he would do something that he would regret if he looked at her too much. Ji Dong was sure that if he had met Chen Sichuan instead of the flaming bar, he would have fallen in love with her without hesitation. To be precise, what kind of man would refuse to fall in love with this perfect girl? None. Ji Dong could make this judgment. Half a year later, with a pft, Ji Dong spat out a mouthful of blood. He leaned against the entrance of the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples' cave while panting heavily. His expression was a little mischievous. There was indignation, amusement, and even joy and helplessness on his face. He muttered to himself, "This fellow, the Dragon Emperor, is taking revenge on me. He's so ruthless every time. Didn't I just make him suffer a little in our first fight? Yet, he's taking revenge on me like this. He really doesn't have any self-restraint as an emperor at all." Half a year had passed, and the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples all had their own mounts as they wished. After discussing with the Dragon Emperor and the Dragon Kings, the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples finally chose rank 8 or rank 9 giant dragons. Those with 7 crowns and above chose rank 9 dragons, while Lan Bauer, Du Exner, and Du Ming chose rank 8 dragons. Of course, they had their own reasons for doing so. This was because the higher the level of a giant dragon, the more fixed its abilities were, and the more difficult it was to change them. If they were to directly sign a contract with a rank 10 giant dragon, although the giant dragon would agree under the pressure of the Dragon Kings, it would also be dissatisfied because of the difference in strength between the two parties. How could they cooperate perfectly with the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples? After magical beasts and humans formed a contract, what they needed the most was a process of growing up together. Only after experiencing this process would they truly have a tacit understanding with each other and establish deep feelings for each other. This required room for growth. As a result, the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples did not choose a rank 10 giant dragon, but instead chose the rank 9 and rank 8 with the most potential. Right now, among all the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples, other than Ah Jin, who was still awakening his bloodline at the Earth Dragon ancestor's side, all of them already had their own mounts. Of course, this also included Chen Sichuan's thoughts. Thinking Dong had formed a master-slave contract with Chen Sichuan, so it was extremely attached to her. No matter what, it would always stick to Chen Sichuan, causing Chen Sichuan to have no choice but to hug it. However, as time passed, Chen Sichuan gradually discovered the powerful abilities of this egg-shaped Thinking Dong. She was not an ordinary person, she was the flaming bar that was once a second-level god. After carefully inspecting Thinking Dong's situation, and even using that strand of divine sense to scan it, Chen Sichuan came to the conclusion that in the near future, not only would Thinking Dong be able to hatch, even before it hatched, it would also be able to become a powerful ally with her. As for what this ally was, she did not tell anyone else. She wanted to keep this secret for future battles and use this ally to help the man she loved. For the past half a year, the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples had been training hard without rest. Due to the absence of Ah Jin, Ji Dong could only explain the wonders of the 5 elements cycle formation to everyone, as well as teach them how to use it. Previously, when they were faced with a crisis, Ji Dong had temporarily used his soul power to form a cycle with the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciples. Once Ah Jin returned, it would be a piece of cake for them to set up the 5 elements cycle formation. In this aspect, the Dragon Tribe was extremely cooperative, to the point that Ji Dong's sparring partner was the Dragon Monarch. The Dragon Monarch only wanted to be Ji Dong's sparring partner, while the 4 dragon kings and some 10th-level giant dragons were a nightmare for the other heavenly stem holy disciples. Facing sparring partners who were stronger than them, how could the talented heavenly stem holy disciples not be stimulated to their potential? Of course, what they had to endure in the process of stimulation was their own problem. This was definitely a pain and joy, and it was a joy that they could not feel now. Chapter 456. The one who suffered the most was undoubtedly Ji Dong himself. On the first day he came to the Dragon Valley, he had injured the Dragon Emperor. In the past 6 months, the Dragon Emperor had sincerely accompanied Ji Dong in actual combat. Even though the Dragon Emperor had a sense of propriety, it was still the Dragon Emperor's strength. Moreover, in order to properly help Ji Dong, the Dragon Emperor had specially said that he could accompany Ji Dong in actual combat twice a day. The results of the 2 actual combat matches had resulted. Now, Chen Sichuan had returned the core of life to Ji Dong, and Ji Dong had also used up a whole bottle of the 1,000-year source of life in the past 6 months. It should be known that a drop of the source of life could save a person's life. Of course, while enduring the great pain, Ji Dong's actual combat ability had also improved by leaps and bounds. Facing the training of a saint-level powerhouse, it could be said that he had squeezed out all his potential as much as possible with only the 7 crowns of magic power. Throughout the entire process of cultivation, although Ji Dong had endured great pain, he would gain something from every actual combat. When he first fought with the Dragon Emperor, as long as the Dragon Emperor used his abnormal dragon drill tyrannical demon domain, Ji Dong would immediately be unable to do anything about it. He would be beaten up and thrown out of the Dragon Emperor's cave residence. Now, although the Dragon Emperor's dragon drill tyrannical demon domain could still bring great trouble to Ji Dong, it was not enough to completely affect the process of his combat. In the past 6 months, the actual combat ability of Ji Dong could not be described with numbers. However, during this time, his magic power had also improved by leaps and bounds. Now, it had risen to level 79. Although he had just entered level 79, it was only a step away from level 80 and the 8 crowns of magic power. Ji Dong cultivated the yin and yang dual fire. Once he entered the 8 crowns of magic power, his ultimate magic power and yin-yang dual fire combination skill would be able to truly contend with a 9-crown demon master. He might even be stronger than an ordinary 9-crown demon master. At least, Ji Dong was confident that he could challenge Fatty Zhou Xiaoxiao one-on-one after he obtained the demon domain. Not only had his magic power increased rapidly, but what surprised Ji Dong the most was the improvement of his deity strike. It had risen from the 4th realm to the 5th realm. This was a very natural thing. In the battle with the Dragon Emperor, besides the deity strike, Ji Dong had no other means that could pose a threat to the Dragon Emperor. He had been constantly using the deity strike in actual combat every day, so how could his deity strike not improve? Fury had finally become the first person among the heavenly stem saints to break through to the 8th crown. However, his situation also clearly told Ji Dong that once his magic power broke through to the 8th crown, it would be extremely difficult to advance any further. At the beginning of half a year of cultivation, Fury had already reached the 8th crown. Every day, he was constantly sparring with the Dragon Kings and training day and night. But now, his magic power was only at level 81, and there was still a certain gap between him and level 82. In other words, Ji Dong's magic power was about to catch up to Fury's. The rich magic power in the Dragon Valley was of great help to the heavenly stem saints. The rich magic elements in the Dragon Valley were of great help to the heavenly stem saint. After continuous combat every day, they naturally needed to constantly cultivate and replenish their magic power. The ones who improved the most were Du Ming and Du Exhilarating. Now, both of their magic power had successfully broken through to the 7th crown, and Lan Bao was one step ahead of them. After half a year of hard work, all the heavenly stem saints had reached the 7th crown or above, and Ji Dong was not the only one who was close to the 8th crown. Miao Miao, Yao Qianshu, and Lang Tianyi's cultivation had also reached level 78. Previously, their magic power was no less than Ji Dong's, and during this period of time, they had been constantly cultivating, but their magic power had been surpassed by Ji Dong. This proved how badly Ji Dong had been destroyed by the Dragon Emperor every day for the past 6 months. Woo woo! The sudden sound brought Ji Dong back to his senses. He did not need to look to know who had come. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon appeared beside Ji Dong, and the two big heads, Maotai and Wuliangye, came over and rubbed Ji Dong's arms on both sides of his body, looking extremely intimate. After returning to the Dragon Valley, they did not stay in the core of life again. In the past 6 months, they had been playing like crazy, causing trouble everywhere in the Dragon Valley every day. That's right, they were causing trouble. These two little fellows were extremely belligerent. Most of the time, they had been staying in the core of life to repair themselves, so their congenital deficiencies were not obvious. Now that they had returned to the Dragon Valley, they had caused a huge commotion. The ordinary dragons did not have to worry about the Maotai and Wuliangye, but the 10th grade dragons were out of luck. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon's favorite thing to do every day was to challenge them. The Dragon Emperor had already announced the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon's identity to all the clansmen on the first day of its return. Before Si Dong hatched, the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon was most likely to become the next Dragon Emperor. No one dared to offend it. Even the few Dragon Kings in the Dragon Tribe were inferior to it. Hence, when the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon challenged the 10th grade dragons, none of them dared to refuse. In the beginning, these 10th grade dragons did not dare to go all out, for fear that they would injure the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon. However, they soon realized that even if they went all out, they would still be at a disadvantage when facing the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon was only a 9th grade dragon, but the Maotai and Wuliangye were like Ji Dong's battles with the Fiend Masters. Its ability to challenge those of a higher level was undeniable. Furthermore, this fellow attacked just like how its father, the Dragon Emperor, had dealt with Ji Dong. Although it did not hold back much. Over the past 6 months, almost all the 10th grade dragons in the Dragon Valley had been defeated by it. Now, there was no need to be nervous when one of the 10th grade dragons was missing some scales or had burn marks. It was obvious that this poor dragon had just been challenged by the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon's daughter with the Maotai and Wuliangye. The 4 Dragon Kings had already received countless complaints from the 10th grade dragons, but they were all suppressed by them. It was not easy for the Dragon Emperor's child to be alive and kicking. Furthermore, it was so talented. Why would they restrain it? Fortunately, the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon had something that made the 10th grade dragons feel relieved. It never challenged the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon at night. On the first day they returned to the Dragon Valley, the Maotai and Wuliangye reluctantly stayed with their parents for a night. On the second day, they could not wait to return to Ji Dong and Chen Xishuan's side. Yes, it was Ji Dong and Chen Xishuan. Ji Dong was extremely helpless about this. He did not know if it was because Chen Xishuan had always been carrying the core of life, but the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon was not only very attached to Ji Dong, but also to Chen Xishuan. Since it was not going back to the core of life, it made a request that Ji Dong and Chen Xishuan be by its side at night. In fact, this was not a big deal. After all, everyone was cultivating in the same cave. At most, Ji Dong and Chen Xishuan would be a little closer to each other when they cultivated at night. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon was more than 15 meters long, so it had no problem separating them. However, what amused Ji Dong and Chen Xishuan was that the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and Si Dong were actually jealous because of Chen Xishuan. The Diamond Dragon King told Chen Xishuan that Si Dong was also a girl. Just like the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon, Dong had always been in Qin Sixuan's arms. When the sacred evolution fire dragon returned on the first night, it tried to get close to Qin Sixuan, but it was strongly resisted by Dong. Although Dong did not hatch successfully, she turned her body into a huge shield and stood between the sacred evolution fire dragon and Qin Sixuan. She refused to let the Maotai and Wuliangye get close to her. Maotai and Wuliangye had bad tempers to begin with. They did not care whether she was their sister or not. In an instant they started fighting. It was at that time that Dong saw how powerful Dong was. Dong was born earlier than the sacred evolution fire dragon, so she was the older sister. Although she had not hatched yet, after forming a contract with Qin Sixuan, her ever-changing ability had become more powerful. Relying on her constant transformation, she did not let the Maotai and Wuliangye get close to Qin Sixuan during the 2-hour battle. In the end, the Maotai and Wuliangye even attacked in anger, but Dong blocked them. Of course, they were connected by blood after all. The Maotai and Wuliangye could not launch the most powerful fatal attack. Even so, Dong in the dragon egg state had already displayed her powerful ability. For the first time, Dong felt that it was not a mistake for Qin Sixuan to sign a contract with the Dragon Clan's chief crown princess. In the end, both sides finally came to a compromise. Dong allowed the sacred evolution fire dragon to get close to Qin Sixuan, but not touch her body. The sacred evolution fire dragon had a bad temper, but in the end it tolerated it. As for how they communicated with Dong did not know, and neither did Qin Sixuan. The sacred evolution fire dragon only sent one message to Dong, and that was a secret between the two sisters. "Ouch, be gentler." Dong cried out in pain. The Maotai and Wuliangye touched his wound, causing his body to twitch slightly. Even with his phoenix dance dragon snake transformation, he was still injured, so the pain was naturally more intense than that of an ordinary person. The Maotai and Wuliangye raised their heads at almost the same time, looking at the sky above the Dragon Valley. Their eyes were filled with resentment, clearly blaming their father for being too ruthless. Dong stroked their big heads and smiled. "It's not a bad thing for the Dragon Emperor to be stricter with me. At least, in the past 6 months, my cultivation has grown the fastest. When I break through the 8 crowns and have my own demon realm, I think I won't be in such a sorry state." Woo-woo. The Maotai and Wuliangye snorted at the same time. Dong laughed. "That won't do. That's your father. How can you fight with your father?" The sacred evolution fire dragon was telling him that it wanted to face the Dragon Emperor with Dong next time and participate in actual combat. A faint smile appeared on Dong's face. He thought to himself, "When I break through the 8 crowns, if I really have the Maotai and Wuliangye, I won't be able to defeat the Dragon Emperor easily, but it won't be easy for the Dragon Emperor to beat me up again." Ever since Dong's deity Killing Strike reached the 5th level, even the Dragon Emperor wouldn't be willing to be touched by him. The power of the deity Killing Strike became more and more obvious as his cultivation increased. Dong had a clear feeling that when his deity Killing Strike reached the 6th level, he might be able to learn a skill exclusive to the deity Killing Strike, just like the deity Attraction. At that time, even the Dragon Emperor would have to be wary of him. However, after breaking through the 5th level, he didn't feel that his deity Killing Strike had any improvement. This skill required accumulation and constant comprehension in actual combat. Fortunately, he now had the Dragon Emperor, an almost perfect sparring partner. Dong even thought that after Ah Jin's dragon bloodline was fully awakened, he should also find the Earth Dragon ancestor to spar with him. He wanted to feel the powerful pressure of a peak martial saint. This would definitely be beneficial to him. He would also be able to adapt to the pressure of the dark heavenly secrets that he would have to face in the future. Of course, these were all in the future. Before he broke through to the 8 champions, Dong would never find himself this kind of trouble. Although he was confident, he would never be arrogant. Just as Ji Dong was thinking about what method he should use to face the Dragon Emperor in the next actual combat, footsteps came from behind him. Ji Dong didn't need to look back to know who the familiar footsteps belonged to. They were elegant and calm. Who else could it be other than Qin Sixuan? Sixuan, what's the matter? Ji Dong didn't look back and asked calmly. Qin Sixuan looked at Ji Dong's broad back and couldn't help but smile faintly. Reality proved that Ji Dong wasn't a cold-blooded person after all. Ever since she and Si Dong had formed a contract, Ji Dong's attitude towards her had obviously changed. Although he couldn't say that he had accepted her, at least he didn't explicitly reject her. His attitude towards her was also not as cold as before. Qin Sixuan wasn't afraid that Ji Dong's attitude towards her was bad. What she was most afraid of was that no matter what she did, Ji Dong wouldn't react. At least for now, everything that Ji Dong had done wasn't ineffective. Although there was still a long way to go for Ji Dong to change his feelings from the flaming bar to her, at least for now, there was still a chance. Teacher Ji Dong, do you still remember what you promised me half a year ago? I'm afraid that we have to set off now. Qin Sixuan said with a smile. Ji Dong stared blankly for a moment. For the past 6 months, he had been completely immersed in cultivation and actual combat. He had indeed forgotten about what had happened half a year ago. Now that Qin Sixuan had reminded him of Qin Sixuan's engagement, he didn't know why, but when he thought that Qin Sixuan was someone else's fiancée, he felt a little uncomfortable. Chapter 457. Ji Dong soaked in the river for 10 minutes in one breath. He managed to avoid suffocation by relying on his strong inner breath and magical powers. Amidst the splashing sounds, he popped his head out of the water and panted heavily. With the help of the suffocating feeling, he gradually calmed down. A bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Ji Dong was actually glad that only he and Qin Sixuan came out this time. If there were other companions, the scene before him would have been so embarrassing. However, if he did not leave immediately, he was afraid that he would not be able to control himself and push Qin Sixuan down. Self-control was something that varied from person to person. In front of ordinary girls, men would more or less have a certain amount of self-control. However, in front of a top-notch beauty like Qin Sixuan, who was as perfect as an exquisite porcelain, how many people could resist her? Among men, Ji Dong's self-control was definitely extremely strong. However, don't forget that Qin Sixuan had not only appeared in front of him, but had also started to chase after him. Facing such a beautiful girl who was willing in front of him, if it wasn't for his stubborn love for the flames in his heart, he probably wouldn't have been able to endure it a long time ago. After all, he was still a human, and everyone had 7 emotions and 6 desires. Jumping out of the river and landing on the shore, Ji Dong was speechless when he saw his wet clothes. He was too impatient just now and jumped into the river without even taking off his clothes. He deserved to be in such a sorry state. He took off his wet clothes and changed into a new one. He sorted out his emotions and tried his best to calm himself down. He even used all his thoughts on the 4 years of flaming bar to return to normal. Ji Dong's biggest mistake was to underestimate the seductive power of Qin Sixuan's body. He could barely control himself when facing Qin Sixuan, but when their bodies touched, Ji Dong's self-control almost collapsed instantly. He slowly walked back reluctantly. Ji Dong smiled bitterly in his heart. In order to escape, he had even agreed to something that he should not have agreed to. The following period would be even more difficult. After entering Dongmu Empire, he would have to fulfill his promise with Qin Sixuan. When Ji Dong returned to Qin Sixuan's side, he was surprised to find that she seemed to have recovered her composure. There was a tranquil smile on her delicate and fair face. She was squatting there, fiddling with some dried branches that she had picked up from the surroundings. She took out some dry food and fruits and placed them beside her. She looked at the firewood in front of her and waited quietly. Looking at her tranquil expression, Ji Dong's heart trembled again. He hurriedly suppressed his thoughts and lowered his head, not daring to look at her any longer. He bit the tip of his tongue lightly, using the pain to calm his heart. Why was his self-control so weak now? Ji Dong did not understand. It was not that his self-control had weakened, but it was because Chen Xishuan's position in his heart had become more and more important. She had subtly seeped into his heart like a moisturizer. However, his love for the flaming bar was even stronger, so he would never admit that he had any feelings for Chen Xishuan. Humans were emotional creatures. Time was the foundation of relationship. This saying was not wrong at all. After being together for so long, how could Ji Dong not feel a little moved by Chen Xishuan? "Teacher Ji Dong, you're back. Light the fire, let's heat up the dry food." Chen Xishuan's pleasant voice rang out. She did not go over to him. From her perspective, she did not want to force Ji Dong too much. She did not want to force him to retaliate. If he refused to return to the Eastern Wood Empire with her, wouldn't that be self-defeating? However, this was in line with the essence of relaxation. Her calmness and indifference had a greater impact on Ji Dong's heart. Ji Dong sat down opposite Chen Xishuan. With a flick of his fingers, the firewood in front of him was already set ablaze. This was a rather difficult night for Ji Dong. Fortunately, he could still focus on his cultivation. He did not even say a word to Chen Xishuan for the entire night. In other words, he did not dare to speak to Chen Xishuan for the entire night. This was the first time in half a year that his cultivation was not effective. It was not only because he had left the Dragon Valley, but more importantly, because he had spent most of his energy on calming his heart. The sacred evolution fire dragon returned early the next morning. The two of them set off again. Not long after, they finally entered the territory of the Eastern Wood Empire. They headed straight for the capital, Eastern Wood City. By evening, Eastern Wood City was already in sight. Only then did Ji Dong let the sacred evolution fire dragon land 20 kilometers away from Eastern Wood City. They could not just fly in like this. The capital of the Eastern Wood Empire was definitely not lacking in powerful cultivators. Of course, with Chen Xishuan's status in the Eastern Wood Empire, it would not be too much trouble even if they flew in. Mao Tai and Wu Yangye reluctantly returned to the core of life. Ji Dong looked into the distance and saw nothing but greenery. The Eastern Wood Empire was indeed famous for its wood character. In terms of environmental protection, it was definitely the best of the 5 empires. "Teacher Ji Dong," Chen Xishuan called out softly. Ji Dong turned his head to look at her and asked, "What is it?" Chen Xishuan smiled and said, "From now on, I can't call you teacher anymore. I'll just call you by your name. Also, this is how we should be." As she spoke, she took the initiative to hold Ji Dong's hand. Her smooth little hand melted into Ji Dong's broad and slender palm. A feeling of fullness and comfort immediately spread through Chen Xishuan's body. Ji Dong's soul, in particular, could not resist Chen Xishuan's soul at all. It was as if his soul had merged with hers. Holding Ji Dong's large hand, Chen Xishuan's pretty face revealed a hint of sweetness. She looked up at Ji Dong's seemingly calm and cold face and laughed softly. "Ji Dong, aren't you tired of wearing such a stern face all the time? Why don't you smile a little? We're about to enter Eastern Wood City. From now on, you're my lover. We should at least be a little happier." Ji Dong forced a smile. After a day of adjustment, his heart had calmed down a lot. At this moment, they were only holding hands without any further contact, so he could barely calm down his emotions. "Let's go," Chen Xishuan said with a little excitement. At this moment, she was like a happy elf. She held on to Ji Dong's hand and walked towards Eastern Wood City. She was not anxious at all, nor did she urge her mana to speed up. She just walked leisurely for the distance of 20 kilometers. Ji Dong did not object. He also needed to adjust his mentality. Since he had already promised Chen Xishuan, he had to help her settle this matter. He told himself in his heart that from now on, he was temporarily Chen Xishuan's boyfriend, and that would be the case until they left Eastern Wood City. However, this was only to help Chen Sichuan get through this difficult period, so as not to affect the group of heavenly stem saints. Also, it was to get the 7th bottle of wine for the flaming bar. He had no other intentions. Chen Sichuan was enjoying the warmth of the sunset while Ji Dong kept repeating to himself in his heart, I'm pretending, time waits for no man. When Ji Dong and the rest arrived at Eastern Wood City, the sky was completely dark, and the city gate was already closed. We can only climb over the wall, Chen Sichuan said helplessly. However, she was really happy. Ever since she was reincarnated into this identity, she had never been this happy. She held on to Ji Dong's hand and strolled under the sunset. This feeling was too wonderful. It was as moving as drinking wine. Ji Dong nodded and tightened his grip on her hand. He spread his wings on his back. To him, climbing over the city wall was a piece of cake. In just a few breaths, they were already walking on the streets of Eastern Wood City. At this time, it was early evening and the nightlife had just begun. As the capital of Eastern Wood Empire, Eastern Wood City had no lack of entertainment at night. The streets were even livelier than during the day. Many people who had worked hard for a day were looking for entertainment that could make them happy and relax. Sichuan, where are we going now? Are we going back to the palace? Ji Dong asked. Chen Sichuan shook her head and said, It's already so late. I'll bring you back tomorrow morning. Let's find a hotel to stay in tonight. Ji Dong nodded and said, That's fine. We'll stay for the night. Where are we going to stay? Lead the way. Chen Sichuan burst into laughter and said, Anyway, it's fine as long as we don't stay in the stupid rich hotel. Hearing this, Ji Dong could not help but smile. Every time he went to the stupid rich hotel, he would run into trouble. He really could not stay there. What surprised him was that Chen Sichuan did not bring him to a luxurious hotel. Instead, she brought him to a relatively small, single-story hotel to stay. This hotel did not look big from the outside, but after entering, it was a completely different world. The rows of single-story rooms were a bit like the houses they stayed in at the headquarters of the stupid rich Chamber of Commerce. It was just not as luxurious. Vaguely, Ji Dong seemed to smell a faint smell of sulfur. He could not help but frown. Why would there be a smell of sulfur in this hotel? Chen Sichuan took the key to the room and led Ji Dong to the room that belonged to them. As soon as they entered the room, Ji Dong was stunned because there was only one room. He originally thought that Chen Sichuan would ask for a suite with 2 rooms like they did in other places. However, there were no 2 rooms here. There was not even a living room and a bedroom. There was only a room about 30 square meters. On one side of the room was a mattress, and the rest of the room was simply furnished. The only redeeming feature was that it was clean. While Ji Dong was surprised, his eyes fell on a door inside the room. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. It turned out that there was another world behind it. There should be another room. He let go of Chen Sichuan's hand, walked over, and opened the door inside. Chen Sichuan did not stop him because at this time, her pretty face was also flushed, and her heartbeat was constantly speeding up. It was obvious that she had planned to stay in this hotel. It was also one of the steps that she had discussed with Miao Miao. It would also be her first attempt. She did not know whether she could succeed or not. She was just trying her best. Ji Dong pushed the door inside, and his face suddenly became ugly again. Behind the door was not a room, but a small courtyard. The courtyard was not big, only about 20 square meters. In this 20 square meters, there was a pool of about 10 square meters on one side. He did not know what it was used for. Looking up, he could see the night sky. Obviously, it was not a place to sleep. Sichuan, why did you only get 1 room? This is simply nonsense. Ji Dong walked back to the room and said with slight anger. Chen Sichuan said, Ji Dong, we are a couple now. We can't live separately. Otherwise, it will prove to my father that we are already together. It is not difficult for my father and the people over there to find out my whereabouts after I return to Dongmu City. Therefore, we must live in the same room. Teacher Ji-dong, I am a girl, but I am not afraid. What are you afraid of? Ji-dong was really afraid. Just the thought of living in the same room made his heart beat faster. His eyes flickered, and Ji-dong said resolutely, "No, absolutely not. I am only pretending to be your boyfriend. I am not real. If you live in the same room with me, how will you marry in the future? I can't ruin your reputation." Chen Sichuan lowered her head and said lightly, "Ji-dong, do you think that what I said to you before was a joke? Well, I will solemnly repeat it to you now. Other than you, I will not marry anyone else in this life. What does my reputation have to do with me?" Ji-dong listened to Chen Sichuan's words, and couldn't help but feel a little stunned. For a moment, he couldn't say anything. Chen Sichuan sighed softly and said, "Ji-dong, I will never make things difficult for you. You can live in the room, and I will live in the small courtyard. That should be fine, right? It's not like we have never slept in the open." As she spoke, she had already walked out. Ji-dong hurriedly followed her out and said, "Sichuan, it should be me who lives in the courtyard. You can go to the room." Chen Sichuan thought in her heart, "If I live in the room, how can I carry out the plan?" She looked at Ji-dong and said lightly, "Ji-dong, now there are only two choices for you. I will live outside and you will live inside, or I will live with you. I only have this small request, you won't agree to it? I am not that weak." In the face of Chen Sichuan's sudden unyielding attitude, Ji-dong couldn't help but be a little stunned. His brain was spinning quickly, and after carefully weighing the pros and cons, he had no choice but to retreat to the room. Letting her live outside was much better than the two of them living together. However, letting a girl live in the courtyard, Ji-dong really couldn't bear it. Opening the curtains, Ji-dong wanted to see how Chen Sichuan lived in the courtyard. In his imagination, Chen Sichuan would at most sit cross-legged and cultivate in the courtyard for a night. Chapter 458. Ji-dong initially thought that Chen Sichuan was only cultivating in the courtyard. After pulling open the curtains, he saw that Chen Sichuan was squatting by the 10-square-meter hot spring. She seemed to have opened something, accompanied by the sound of water and hot steam. What is she doing? Ji-dong walked out of the back door again and asked Chen Sichuan curiously, "Sichuan, what are you doing over there?" Chen Sichuan replied without turning her head, "I'm taking a bath. I chose this hotel because of its special feature. The hot spring here is the best in Dongmu City. It's very comfortable to soak in." As she spoke, she stood up and took off her coat, revealing her undergarments. Fortunately, it was late autumn and they had quite a lot of clothes on. However, when he saw Chen Sichuan take off her clothes, Ji-dong was shocked and asked, "Sichuan, you're going to take a bath in the courtyard?" Chen Sichuan turned to look at him with a strange expression on her face. "I live in the courtyard and the hot spring is also in the courtyard. Why can't I take a bath? Ji-dong, why don't you join us? You're my lover now. If you want to join us, I won't object." As she spoke, her pretty face blushed slightly, but she had a faint smile on her face. Her hands had already started to take off her undergarments. Ji-dong closed the door as if he was running away and quickly closed all the curtains. In the process of closing the curtains, he even used his flying serpent flash. One could imagine how flustered he was right now. Chen Sichuan looked at the door and giggled. She deliberately said, "Coward." Her voice was not soft, so Ji-dong could definitely hear her. As she spoke, she really took off her clothes. Looking at the steaming hot water in front of her, Chen Sichuan looked up at the sky and secretly prayed in her heart, "God of evil, if you really want me to fulfill my promise to you, then let's have a heavy rain later." As she prayed, Chen Sichuan gritted her teeth and finally took off the last piece of clothing on her body. Her slender legs stepped lightly into the spring water, making a series of splashing sounds. Ji-dong stood in the room with his back facing the window. The curtains on the other side of the window were light-colored. Although he couldn't see the real scene outside after closing the curtains, he could still see some shadows under the moonlight. Ji-dong swallowed hard and tried to tell himself not to think about it. However, at this moment, he could no longer control his thoughts. There was only a window between them. Chen Xishuan was taking a shower outside, and he was standing in the room. In his ears, he even began to recall what Chen Xishuan had said before. Ji-dong, come with us. Such a simple sentence definitely had a tyrannical impact. Ji-dong only felt the blood in his body boiling, especially the sound of water coming from outside. His brain even began to uncontrollably imagine the actual appearance of Chen Xishuan's alluring body. How could this be? The bitter smile on Ji-dong's face became more and more intense. Wouldn't he have to endure more torture tonight than yesterday? Right now, he only hoped that Chen Xishuan's bath would be a little faster, a little faster. Quickly sitting on the floor, Ji-dong kept chanting in his heart, Namo Amitba, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. As it turned out, a girl's bathing speed would never be too fast. Moreover, Chen Xishuan brought Ji-dong to live here with a purpose. It was specifically to seduce him. Originally, Chen Xishuan had no confidence in this at all. However, this confidence was brought to her by Ji-dong. Yesterday, when she saw Ji-dong flee, she knew that she was not unattractive to Ji-dong. With this premise, she naturally had more confidence today. Soaking in the hot spring, the slightly scorching hot spring seeped into her body, causing Chen Xishuan's originally tense emotions to gradually relax. Soaking in a hot spring was really a wonderful enjoyment, especially in this kind of open-air hot spring. Looking at the moon and stars in the sky, it was an even more beautiful enjoyment. It seemed that choosing this place was the right choice. From the perspective of the flaming bar, it was actually her first time here. However, in the memory of this body, she had good memories of this place. Now, it seemed that this was indeed the right choice. Soaking in the slightly scorching hot spring seemed to relax all the bones and muscles in her body. Even her mind was slightly more relaxed. Chen Xishuan was no longer as nervous as before. Although Chen Xishuan did not know that Ji-dong was bitterly chanting Amitba in the room, when she saw how quickly Ji-dong drew the curtains, she knew that her plan was effective. With great difficulty, Ji-dong used the faith of his past life to slightly calm himself down. However, he heard Chen Xishuan's voice. Ji-dong, can I trouble you to throw me the big towel in the room? I'm almost done. Ji-dong's upper body swayed, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Don't be like this. You're going to kill me. Don't you know how tempting you are? Faced with such an absolute vitality, an absolute beauty that could not be hit, scolded, or even avoided, Ji-dong's current feelings could only be described as being in so much pain that he wished he was dead. He had already begun to consider whether he should give up on the bottle of wine and escape from this place as soon as possible. After a few violent breaths, Ji-dong stood up again, walked to the side, grabbed the big towel, and walked to the door. He opened the door a little, and with a shake of his hand, he threw the big towel outside based on his previous memory. Thank you. Chen Xishuan's melodious voice rang out, followed by the sound of water splashing. Ji-dong immediately thought of a picture of a beauty coming out of a bath. Ji-dong, you really don't want to come and take a bath? It's so comfortable. This pool is very big, and there's no problem at all for 2 people. How about I put the towel around me and take a bath? I won't let you see anything you shouldn't see. Poof. Finally, 2 lines of blood spurted uncontrollably from Ji-dong's nose. At this time, Chen Xishuan stood up from the pool and looked in the direction of the door. When she suddenly saw blood spurting out, she was shocked and rushed over almost immediately. Ji-dong, what's wrong? Chen Xishuan had already rushed to the front of the door in the midst of her anxious exclamation. Don't come over. While Ji-dong was shouting, Chen Xishuan had already rushed in front of him, and it was too late to shout. Chen Xishuan was standing in front of Ji-dong, and clearly saw the blood flowing out of Ji-dong's nose like 2 red snakes. She hurriedly used the big towel in her hand to help him wipe it, but she completely ignored the embarrassment of being naked at this time. As the saying goes, concern leads to confusion. At this time, she really didn't want to seduce Ji-dong, but because she saw Ji-dong's nose bleeding, it was the most direct reaction. However, it was this immediate reaction that brought the greatest impact to Ji-dong. When Chen Sichuan handed over the towel, her perfect body was completely presented in front of Ji-dong. It was absolutely the golden ratio, and the ratio of the length of her legs to her body was exactly 0.618. Her waterfall-like dark green hair was scattered behind her, and some of it rested on the snow-white plump chest. Her white and tender skin was like soft tofu, and the crystal-like water droplets were constantly rolling down. It was simply an insult to describe Princess Xian as a lotus flower out of the water. Chen Sichuan's beauty was simply indescribable. In his previous life, Ji-dong always thought that girls were much more beautiful when they wore clothes than when they were not, because good clothes and decorations could enhance a person's temperament. However, this kind of thinking was not applicable to Chen Sichuan at all. Even when they were together at the flaming bar, Ji-dong had never seen the flaming bar completely naked. It could be said that Chen Sichuan was the first girl who confessed to him, and this stimulation made Ji-dong's nose continue to bleed uncontrollably. Ji-dong suddenly closed his eyes, and at the same time, he pushed backwards, trying to push Chen Sichuan out of the door. However, he was in an absolute panic at this time, so he naturally lost his aim when he pushed. He just happened to push the towel that Chen Sichuan handed over, and then pushed some protruding parts of Chen Sichuan's body. It was very elastic, soft, and plump. Fortunately, he did not feel the slipperiness of the water droplets, but even so, Ji-dong almost completely lost control. He had already used God-killing attraction with his left hand, and after pushing Chen Sichuan away, the door was slammed shut. Ji-dong held the door handle tightly, lest Chen Sichuan rushed in again. Even outside the door, Chen Sichuan could clearly hear his heavy breathing. Ah! It was only then that Chen Sichuan cried out in shock, and quickly covered her body with the towel. Ji-dong, who was in the room, heard the splash of water. It was obvious that Chen Sichuan had jumped into the hot spring pool again. Of course, Ji-dong understood that Chen Sichuan rushed over because of his nosebleed. However, even so, he could not stand it. His heart was beating at least 3 times faster than before, and he could clearly feel the speed of his blood circulation. Ji-dong's face was completely hot, and even his eyes had become a little red. Panting heavily, the effect of Namo Amitbao was no longer effective. All he could do was hold on to the door tightly to stabilize his mind. With a slap, Ji-dong slapped himself hard. Ji-dong, what nonsense are you thinking? You already have the flaming bar, how can you have such a strong desire for another girl? Are you worthy of the flaming bar? Are you worthy of everything the flaming bar has done for you? Ji-dong could not help but recall everything that had happened on the Holy Evil Island. When he returned to the core world, the last words left by the flaming bar before he left kept repeating in his mind. In order to calm himself down, he had no choice but to summon the most painful scene in his heart. The heart-wrenching pain was like ice water that woke him up, and the boiling blood in his body finally calmed down. Chen Sichuan's breathing was no weaker than Ji-dong's. It took her a lot of effort to calm herself down. He saw it, he must have seen it. She bit her red lips lightly and sighed in her heart. After gradually calming down, Chen Sichuan thought about how Ji-dong had seen her earlier. He was so agitated that he even had a nosebleed. This was actually not a good thing. She knew Ji-dong too well. She knew that this would definitely make Ji-dong even more wary of her. It seemed that today's plan would not work, especially when the moon and stars were still bright in the sky. It did not look like it was going to rain at all. With a soft sigh, Chen Sichuan began to wash her body. She did not want to agitate Ji-dong any further, in case it backfired. Chen Sichuan got up from the pool and wrapped a big towel around her body. She looked around helplessly. It seemed that she really had to meditate in this courtyard for the whole night. Just as she was feeling a little depressed, a sudden clap of thunder sounded without warning. The loud rumble gave her a fright. When she looked up, the clear sky was rapidly gathering dark clouds. It immediately created an oppressive feeling, as if dark clouds were pressing down on her. Could it be that the god of evil had heard her prayers? Qin Sichuan stared at the dark clouds in the sky, dumbfounded. This clap of thunder also caused Ji Dong, who was in the room, to shiver. He woke up from the pain that was wreaking havoc in his heart. At this moment, he did not dare to drink. He was afraid that if he got drunk, he would do something that would let the flaming bar down. What would he do? Why was there thunder? Before Ji Dong could think further, the clap of thunder sounded one after another. The roar of thunder continued to wreak havoc, as if it was going to destroy the whole world. Was it going to rain? Such a dull clap of thunder, was it going to rain? Ji Dong frowned. If it was really going to rain, how could he let a girl stand outside in the rain while he stayed in the room? After all, he was a man. Just as Ji Dong was having a battle in his heart, suddenly, a series of almost continuous banging sounds were heard. In the celestial realm. "Foul, god of evil, you're breaking the rules," the god of kindness shouted angrily. "How am I breaking the rules? I'm just manipulating the weather," the god of evil said lazily. The god of kindness said angrily, "Isn't manipulating the weather a violation of the rules? You're indirectly helping them get together. Women are naturally attracted to men. Although Ji Dong can't control himself, it's just a matter of lust. You're helping the flaming bar, aren't you just hoping that something will happen between them?" The god of evil snorted and said, "You said it yourself, it's indirect. A straight body is not afraid of a crooked shadow. If Ji Dong doesn't have any ulterior motives, what's the point of manipulating the weather?" The god of kindness became even angrier and said, "But you can't do this. The flaming bar was just praying for rain, but you made a huge hailstorm. You can't do this." Chapter 459. Bang bang bang, bang. Ji Dong was startled by the rapid explosions. He didn't dare to open the back door. Instead, he opened the front door and looked outside. As soon as he opened the door, he was immediately startled. Hailstones the size of ping-pong balls were falling from the sky, hitting everything outside. All kinds of plants in the hotel yard were continuously smashed by the hailstones, and a thick cold air immediately hit him as soon as he opened the door. After closing the door, Ji Dong was stunned. From the thunder to the falling hailstones, he did not hear Qin Sichuan's voice from the backyard. She did not even call out to him, nor did she ask to come in to hide. Why? What was wrong with her? Ji Dong quickly walked to the back door and opened it. He could not care less in such a heavy rain and hailstones. After opening the door, he saw Qin Sichuan. The moment he saw her, Ji Dong felt as if the softest part of his heart had been violently touched. Qin Sichuan was standing under the eaves next to the door. The eaves only extended a foot from the house. In such a heavy storm with hailstones, how could the small eaves shelter her from the wind and rain? She stood there with the towel tightly wrapped around her body. Her delicate body was even trembling slightly as she stared at the misty rain in front of her. With her cultivation, of course, the hailstones could not hurt her. However, looking at the water droplets rolling down her face and the big towel that was completely soaked in the rain, Ji Dong could no longer bear the blame in his heart. He grabbed Qin Sichuan's shoulder and pulled her into the room. When he pulled her, only Ji Dong knew how much he wanted to pull her into his arms instead of into the room. With a bang, he closed the door, isolating himself from the outside wind and rain. Looking at Qin Sichuan, who was dripping with water, Ji Dong almost roared, "It's raining so heavily, why don't you come in?" Qin Sichuan lowered her head slightly and said pitifully, "I'm sorry, I don't want you to be so sad." "I'm sorry, Ji Dong, I really didn't mean it. I was afraid that if I came in, your nose would bleed again." "You?" Ji Dong was a little sluggish. She was truly beautiful. At this moment, her lovely appearance caused Ji Dong's body and mind to tremble. His heart, which had just calmed down, once again began to boil. He was even more impulsive than before. Biting his lower lip, Ji Dong walked to the side and threw another big dry towel to Chen Xishuan. Then he walked to the corner of the room and sat down with his back facing her. Quickly wipe the rain off your body. You can sleep in the room too. You can sleep on the bed. I'll just meditate here. Chen Xishuan didn't object. She didn't say anything. She put the wet towel aside and used the dry towel to wipe her body. Then, she crawled into the clean and dry quilt on the bed. She hugged the quilt, but her body was still very cold. Of course, she could see Ji Dong's pain at this moment. He only wants this body of mine, but he doesn't love me, right? Chen Xishuan was very clear in her heart. She understood that if she didn't have such a perfect body, Ji Dong wouldn't be so attracted to her. In fact, she didn't know that if it wasn't because she had a trace of the flaming bar's divine sense in her soul world that subtly influenced Ji Dong, even if she was so perfect, she wouldn't have such a feeling of attraction to Ji Dong. Ji Dong could reject Chen Xishuan, but how could he resist the attraction of the flaming bar's divine sense? Ji Dong's heart was boiling. At this moment, his mind was completely blank. Outside, it was a world of wind and rain. The warmth in the room made him feel even more enchanting. There was no other way. Perhaps anesthesia would make him feel better. Ji Dong almost subconsciously took out a bottle of liquor from the vermilion bird bracelet. He didn't even bother to unscrew the bottle cap. He directly cut off the mouth of the bottle with his palm, tilted his head back, and gulped down the fiery liquor. Sure enough, the burning sensation that instantly spread throughout his body created a strong conflict with the boiling blood in his body. Under the stimulation of the strong alcohol, he finally managed to suppress the pity, desire, and other emotions that he couldn't explain clearly and unexplainable in his heart. It was as if he was grasping at a life-saving straw. After finishing one bottle, he immediately took out a second bottle of wine. Just like when Raging Flame had just passed away, he constantly used the liquor to anesthetize his body, drinking bottle after bottle. Ji Dong was a little glad. He was glad that he always carried so much liquor in the vermilion bird bracelet. At this moment, it finally played a certain role. His alcohol tolerance was very good, but he couldn't help but drink bottle after bottle of different liquor. Gradually, his vision became blurry. The pleasure of anesthesia stabilized his emotions. Flaming bar, I only have the flaming bar, I only love the flaming bar. Flaming bar, do you know? I miss you so much. Ji Dong murmured in a low voice. His voice was even a little choked. He was already a little drunk. Under these circumstances, the desire from before had already disappeared. Instead, the longing for the flaming bar was like a spring, flooding every corner of his soul. Chen Xishuan sat on the bed and looked at the suffering Ji Dong. Her heart was already trembling. As she watched Ji Dong drink bottle after bottle of liquor, the conflict in her heart rose to the peak. The sudden call made Chen Xishuan sit up abruptly. She looked at Ji Dong, her eyes uncontrollably erupting with strong emotions. The changes in the outside environment and everything that had just happened not only affected Ji Dong, but also her at the same time. It had been more than a year. She had returned to this world and been with Ji Dong for more than a year. The pain she had endured for more than a year was no less than the pain Ji Dong was suffering in his heart. It made her feel like she was about to collapse at any time. Ji Dong drank the liquor with his back facing her. This call also deeply pierced the softest part of Chen Xishuan's heart. Ji Dong. Chen Xishuan called out softly. She did not control her voice. Whether it was her tone or her emotions, they all belonged to the flaming bar. Yes, at this moment, she seemed to have returned to her original identity. As she looked at Ji Dong in front of her, she could no longer suppress the emotions in her heart. When he heard this call, Ji Dong's body suddenly stiffened. This time, his blood was really ignited. He turned around abruptly and looked at the bed. In his blurred eyes, he did not see Chen Sichuan but his flaming bar. The flaming bar that he had yearned for day and night. Flaming bar, you're the flaming bar. Raging flames, you're raging flames. You're back, you're finally back. Raging flames, do you know how much I've missed you? Do you know that your departure is the darkness of the entire world for me? I miss you so much, raging flames, I miss you so much. I beg you, let me go to another world with you. I can't endure this kind of torture anymore. Tears flowed uncontrollably down Ji Dong's face. His sobbing voice caused Chen Sichuan's body to tremble violently. At this moment, Ji Dong's eyes were bloodshot. He had fallen into a drunken, hallucinatory state. Chen Sichuan did not drink, but her current mental state was no better than Ji Dong's. In Chen Sichuan's heart, the cold voice of the god of evil began to remind her. However, at this moment, she even forcibly ignored this voice. In her eyes there was only Ji Dong, only Ji Dong. She suddenly stood up and, disregarding the fact that she was naked, threw herself at Ji Dong. I'm back. Yes, Ji Dong, I'm back. I know how much you've suffered. I've missed you so much. I've also lived in so much pain that I wish I were dead. I don't know how many times I've wanted to tell you who I am, but I didn't dare to. However, I don't want to see you in so much pain anymore. Even if my body and soul are destroyed, let's go to hell together. Suddenly, the look in her eyes changed. Her gaze became that of the blazing flaming bar. The flaming bar that was burning with Ji Dong's soul flew into Ji Dong's embrace like a swallow. Ji Dong hugged her tightly and said, "Flaming bar, my flaming bar is back. My flaming bar is back." He seemed to be shouting crazily. His voice resonated with the thunder, lightning, and wind outside. He hugged the beautiful woman in his arms tightly, as if he wanted to fuse her body with his. At this moment, their emotions were already in an indescribable, almost hysterical state. Under such circumstances, they had already thrown away all the restraints in their hearts, and all the pain that they had been suppressing in their hearts all this time also gushed out like a volcano eruption at this moment. In Ji Dong's eyes, the person he saw and hugged was not Chen Sichuan, but the flaming bar, his perfect and beloved flaming bar. Chen Sichuan had also forgotten about the threat of the god of evil. At this moment, the two of them hugged each other tightly, all the repressed emotions completely bursting out. Everything in the room darkened. All that was left was the sound of intense panting. Their two bodies were like lightning striking the ground. The explosion after the repression was absolutely terrifying. Ji Dong and Chen Sichuan's minds were completely blank. At this moment, they were completely prepared by their body's instincts. The pain, depression, and all sorts of negative emotions in their hearts exploded at this moment. The contact of their bodies, the perfect fusion of their souls, and the limitless release of their inner world made them finally fuse as one at this moment. Chen Sichuan was originally naked, but Ji Dong's clothes had already disappeared in the next moment. They were directly burned to ashes by the flames of desire on his body. Outside, there was still the sound of thunder. The hail had already passed and was replaced by a violent storm. The shadows of the trees swayed in the strong wind from the window. The two scorching bodies had already rolled onto the bed. This was the release of their bodies and souls. It was as if all the pain had come to an end. It was jerky, even immature, but incomparably passionate. Both of them were releasing everything about each other, completely opening their hearts to each other. Spring couldn't be described as rising in the room. It should be described as blazing, a blazing heat that ignited all their emotions and desires. This pair of lovers had finally truly become one, walking towards the perfect fusion of soul and desire. The dark clouds in the night gradually dispersed. The moment the wind and rain stopped, a trace of white had already appeared on the distant eastern horizon. Faint golden threads appeared at the edge of the sky, spreading rapidly. The sky was bright. It was a brand new day. The plants that were able to escape the wind and rain last night were thriving again. The night passed just like that. It was also at this moment that the two people in the room finally quietened down. They had both been suppressed for far too long. They had been in pain for far too long. In a situation where they had completely lost their minds, their bodies were also doing their best to release everything they had. The sky was bright. After the storm last night, it was another sunny day. However, the sound of even breathing could be heard from the room. Ji Dong and Qin Sichuan's bodies were tightly entwined, and they fell asleep in extreme exhaustion. Last night was crazy. The room seemed to have been baptized by a typhoon. Qin Sichuan fell asleep 2 hours earlier than Ji Dong. This was because during the process she was like a leaf boat in the sea, constantly bearing the impact of the storm. Ji Dong was absolutely exhausted. His madness last night, if it was anyone else, they would not be able to bear it. Only Chen Sichuan, who had a huge amount of life energy, could barely bear it. He was really too tired, not just physically tired, but also mentally tired. After releasing all of this, he naturally fell into a deep sleep. The dragon egg, Si Dong, left Qin Sichuan's embrace for the first time. It lay quietly in the corner of the room, glowing with a faint golden light. Perhaps it was because of its shyness, but Qin Sichuan covered its body with the towel she used yesterday. One day passed in a deep sleep. His original plan to go to the Dongmu Empire's imperial palace was completely delayed. By the time Qin Sichuan woke up, it was already afternoon. She slowly opened her eyes and saw Ji Dong's face right in front of her. Ji Dong was sleeping soundly like a big child. As he inhaled and exhaled, he released the scent she was most familiar with. At this moment, there was a satisfied smile at the corner of his mouth. Occasionally, he would murmur, "Flaming bar." Chen Sichuan's body moved, and she immediately frowned. She let out a low moan. She felt as if her whole body was falling apart. Every part of her body was extremely sore, especially her lower body, which felt like it was going to be torn apart. The pain in her body made her hit Ji Dong lightly. Her pretty face was as red as an apple. She said, "This guy, he doesn't know how to be kind to women at all. It's my first time. It really hurts." Chen Sichuan gritted her teeth and endured the pain. She silently urged the Ewood magic in her body to circulate. A thick aura of life gradually spread throughout her body, helping her to recover. After a full 15 minutes of urging, she felt a little better. She forced herself to sit up on the bed. Chapter 460. During this process, her eyes never left Ji Dong. He slept really soundly. If it was in the past, although I didn't make much noise, he should have woken up long ago. Although it was painful last night, it was really comfortable there. Finally, I became his woman. This time, he can't abandon me, right? Just thinking of this, suddenly, Chen Sichuan's face became pale, because she suddenly remembered that she seemed to have told Ji Dong her real identity last night. Cold sweat appeared on her temples almost in an instant. What should I do? What should I do? The evil god said that if she told Ji Dong her real identity, he would destroy his body and soul. No, don't. Chen Sichuan almost screamed out loud. A series of violent gasps caused the happiness in her heart to vanish. Now that she had woken up, the fear in her heart intensified. She had finally become Ji Dong's woman. If his body and soul were to perish at this time, what would she do? This panic lasted for a long time, and Chen Sichuan gradually calmed down. The first thing she thought of was that Ji Dong drank a lot last night. When he was with her, he was not sober. Maybe he didn't hear what she said? Or did she tell him that it was an auditory hallucination? At the very least, his body and soul had not been completely destroyed, which proved that the punishment of the evil god had not yet befallen him. After all, his appearance belonged to Chen Sichuan. Even if he woke up and interrogated him, he would still deny it and leave. Thinking of this, Chen Sichuan calmed down a little. With the powerful healing and recovery ability of Imu magic, the wounds on her body gradually healed. She carefully got out of bed, first washed her body, and then washed the towel with water. After cleaning up Ji Dong's body with a red face, her eyes fell on the destroyed room. Chen Sichuan shook her head helplessly. He was really too violent last night. This bad guy. Chen Sichuan turned her head again to look at Hyoheim. She couldn't help but see the bright red stain on the bed. This was the proof that she had finally become his woman. When he woke up, she had to put away the bedsheet. Thinking of this, Chen Sichuan's pretty face couldn't help but turn even redder. She thought to herself, what's done can't be undone. Even if he still refuses to be with me after he wakes up, I just have to force him to say those 3 words to me. At that time, I can truly admit my identity. I will be with him forever. Thinking of this, Chen Sichuan couldn't help but feel elated. After cleaning up the room, she changed into a clean underwear. Then she went back to Ji Dong's side and lay down gently against him. Since she had woken up, she was still a little shy to stay naked beside him. Leaning into his broad and warm chest, she pulled his arm over her body and wrapped her arms around his neck. Chen Sichuan's heart was full of satisfaction. How good would it be if she could be with him like this every morning when she was awake? She really looked forward to such a day coming soon. The sun began to set again. Ji Dong only felt that his whole body was so comfortable that he wanted to moan. All the accumulated depression in his heart seemed to have disappeared. His head was still a little dizzy. This was the pain brought by the hangover, but this pain was completely negligible compared with the physical comfort. It was so comfortable. His body moved subconsciously. Suddenly, he felt something close to him. It was soft and bouncy, warm and fragrant. Suddenly, his body stiffened and he suddenly opened his eyes. What he saw was Chen Sichuan's beautiful face. At this moment, she was sleeping soundly in his embrace. When he lowered his head to look at himself, Ji Dong discovered that he was completely naked. Instantly, he fell into a state of panic. What was going on? What happened? What happened? He tried hard to recall everything that happened last night. He seemed to have drunk too much. Then, it seemed that he came back from the flaming bar. Then, he hugged her, got her, and climbed to the peak of bliss again and again. Could it be Ji Dong suddenly sat up, and Chen Sichuan, who was close to him, was also pulled up. With a moan, Chen Sichuan suddenly woke up from her deep sleep. Her starry eyes opened slightly. When she saw Ji Dong's dull expression and frozen gaze, she immediately woke up from her daze. Ji Dong. Chen Sichuan was still in Ji Dong's arms. She followed his gaze and saw the touching dark red spot on the bed. Her pretty face instantly blushed and she said, "Silly, what are you looking at?" Ji Dong said in a daze, "Last night, you and I Chen Sichuan murmured softly, giving him a definite answer. "No." Ji Dong suddenly shouted and quickly jumped off the bed. He landed on the ground and looked at Chen Sichuan with eyes full of disbelief. He panted heavily. Alcohol was the medium of sex. He drank too much last night and actually mistook Sichuan for the flaming bar. Just as Chen Sichuan had predicted, Ji Dong really couldn't remember what happened last night. He had drunk too much in order to numb himself and didn't use his magic to resist the effects of the alcohol. "I actually with you. No, I betrayed the flaming bar. I betrayed my flaming bar." Chen Sichuan was also stunned. Although she expected Ji Dong to have some reaction, she didn't expect his reaction to be so intense. Looking at his face full of grief and pain, she couldn't help but be angry and said, "Am I that inferior to your flaming bar? Is it still a humiliation for you to have my body?" Ji Dong shook his head like a madman and said, No, flaming bar. I didn't do it on purpose. I really didn't do it on purpose. I mistook her for you. I really missed you so much that I had this hallucination. No, how could I do this? How could I have a relationship with another woman?" Suddenly, Ji Dong's eyes turned red. He raised his right hand and instantly, A blinding red light shot out from his right hand and turned into a 3-foot green sword. It was the Vulcan's sword. At this moment, he still wasn't wearing anything. He lowered his head and his gaze landed on his nether regions. He looked at the root of trouble and said, "It's you. You betrayed raging flames. I am innocent. Only by getting rid of you will I be innocent." As he spoke, he swung his right arm down almost without hesitation. The Vulcan's sword in his hand slashed at the root of his worries. "What are you doing?" Chen Sichuan pounced forward and hugged Ji Dong's arm. She stopped the Vulcan's sword at the last moment. She was so scared that her face turned pale. How could this be? He was so excited that he castrated himself just because he had a relationship with her. "Let me go." Ji Dong roared and said, "It betrayed the flaming bar. I have to get rid of it. Otherwise, how am I going to find the flaming bar in the future? I want to find my lover with my innocence." As he spoke, Ji Dong activated the mana in his body and struggled with all his might. Chen Sichuan was still a distance away from him and was about to lose her grip on his arm. "Wait a minute, listen to me, this is all fake." Chen Sichuan shouted in fright. "It's fake?" Ji Dong's crazed gaze froze for a moment and he turned to look at Chen Sichuan. Chen Sichuan took a few deep breaths, and her chest heaved up and down. She looked at Ji Dong, and the look in her eyes became unprecedentedly complicated. After a while, she said with some difficulty, "Yes, all of this is fake. I set this up. I wanted you to think that something had happened between us, so that you would be with me because of this." After hearing her words, Ji Dong's gaze regained some clarity. He said, "What is going on? Make yourself clear." Chen Sichuan looked at him. At this moment, she really wanted to beat him up. She had given him her most precious thing, yet he refused to admit it. He still wanted. "Last night, you drank a lot of alcohol. Then, you suddenly saw me call out the flaming bar. Then, you threw yourself at me and kept calling out the name of the flaming bar. Then, you fell asleep." Ji Dong recalled carefully. He seemed to remember seeing the flaming bar and throwing himself at it. He really couldn't remember anything after that. He only felt that he had experienced a very blissful process. Chen Sichuan gritted her teeth and continued, "Later, I thought of this idea. I heard from the people in the palace that a woman's first time would always bleed. So, I found some animal blood and smeared it on the bed. Then, I helped you take off your clothes and hugged you to sleep. I hoped that you would misunderstand. I thought that by doing this, you wouldn't reject me anymore." Towards the end, she spoke much more fluently. Ji Dong's expression finally softened a little. He looked at Chen Sichuan and said angrily, "How could you do that? You?" Chen Sichuan lowered her head. If looks could kill, Ji Dong would have been dismembered. Of course, she would not let Ji Dong see that look in her eyes. She could only say aggrievedly, "I like you too much. Don't be angry, okay? I know I was wrong." Ji Dong snorted angrily. He turned around, pushed the door open and rushed out. He needed time to calm down. In that instant, his emotions had fluctuated greatly. Even with his strong soul power, he felt that he could not bear it. Moreover, he had a faint feeling that things were not as simple as Chen Sichuan had said. Rushing out of the room, Ji Dong walked aimlessly on the street. He tried hard to recall everything that had happened last night. In his memory, there was only the existence of the flaming bar. He could not remember what had happened between him and Chen Sichuan. Chen Sichuan was stunned when Ji Dong left. After Ji Dong left, Chen Sichuan was also stunned. She had never thought that the final result would be like this. If you wanted her to blame Ji Dong wanted to castrate himself because of his love for raging flames. However, it was impossible for her to not have any reaction after this happened. She had even given her most precious body to someone else, but instead, she had to tell Ji Dong that nothing had happened. Everything was just a trap that she had set up. Chen Sichuan was so angry that her teeth were itching. She didn't know who she should hate, But no matter what, she couldn't let Ji Dong cut off the thing that had caused her so much pain last night but was also very strange. Sitting in the room, Chen Xishuan sighed in her heart. It seemed that she could only endure it. Now she could only hope that Ji Dong would not be affected by this incident and that he would come back with her to solve the problem of the engagement. As she thought about it, Chen Xishuan grabbed the pillow beside her and whipped it hard. Obviously, she thought it was someone. However, she soon ran out of strength. Although she had the extreme Ewood magic to adjust her body, she had been ravaged by a guy who was as strong as a violent bear for a night. It was not something that could be done by running magic. Just as Chen Xishuan was lying on the bed drowsily, the door opened and Ji Dong walked in from outside. As soon as he came back, Chen Xishuan immediately woke up and sat up from the bed to look at him. What made Chen Xishuan very surprised was that Ji Dong's expression had already returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. His entire person looked normal, and even his eyes had become ordinary and unremarkable. Ji Dong, you. Chen Xishuan wanted to say something, but she really didn't know what to say to him at this time. Ji Dong smiled indifferently and said, "You rest, I will practice for a while. Tomorrow I will go back to the palace with you." Hearing what he said, Chen Xishuan suddenly secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and did not dare to flirt with him. She agreed, got into the quilt and lay down obediently. Ji Dong walked to the corner of the room and sat down. From the time he left to the time he returned, it had only taken him half an hour. In this short period of time, he had already thought through many things in his mind. The reason why his expression could return to normal was because he had thought of a way to resist Chen Xishuan's charm. As for what he thought about what had happened before, and whether he completely believed Chen Xishuan's explanation, only he himself knew. Sitting cross-legged, Ji Dong closed his eyes and started to circulate his mana in his body. Gold and black lights were faintly discernible. With his current cultivation, it was very easy for him to control his mana and prevent it from leaking. However, the light that was emitted from his body quickly attracted the attention of Chen Xishuan, who was lying on the bed. The person who understood Ji Dong's strength the most was Chen Xishuan. Ever since Ji Dong started cultivating, he had followed her and received her guidance. Every time he made a huge leap forward, it was almost inseparable from her. Seeing the change in the light on Ji Dong's body, Chen Xishuan couldn't help but feel strange. She didn't quite understand what he was doing. The gold and black lights flickered before being replaced by a faint milky white light. Following that, a layer of red light appeared from under Ji Dong's skin and covered his entire body in the blink of an eye. It was his Divine Fire Saint King armor. Chapter 461. The Sacred King Godfire armor had been refined into his body by Ji Dong. Although it couldn't be said to have become a part of his body, he could at least use it as he pleased. Looking at Ji Dong's appearance, Chen Xishuan could clearly feel that Ji Dong wasn't cultivating on his own. Instead, he was pouring his ultimate dual flames into the Sacred King Godfire armor, as if he was refining it. What's going on? Why would he suddenly want to refine armor? Although Ji Dong had the ultimate dual flames, without the addition of a special item, even his chaotic flame couldn't make the Sacred King Godfire armor, which had already reached the level of a substandard god item, have a qualitative leap. What he was doing was completely futile. However, since Ji Dong was in a state of cultivation, Chen Xishuan obviously couldn't disturb him. Her elegant brows furrowed as she thought about something, but she couldn't figure it out. She guessed that everything Ji Dong was doing right now had something to do with her, or even with what had happened before. However, she couldn't understand how Ji Dong's refining of the Sacred King Godfire armor had anything to do with it. The strange feeling in her body caused Chen Xishuan to gradually fall asleep, while Ji Dong continued to cultivate. When she woke up from her sleep, it was already the next morning. Chen Xishuan opened her eyes and saw a person sitting in a corner, still covered in the Sacred King Godfire armor. However, there was no longer any magical light flashing on his body. Everything looked very normal, so normal that she couldn't get used to it. After another night of cultivation, the healing abilities of the wood element had been fully displayed. At the very least, Chen Sichuan didn't feel any obvious pain anymore. Of course, the process of turning from a girl to a woman still affected her. That crazy night would forever be imprinted in the depths of her soul, and she would never be able to forget it. "You're awake, let's go eat something." Ji Dong just happened to open his eyes at this moment. More accurately speaking, he had spent the entire night cultivating and hadn't slept at all. "Yes." Chen Sichuan got down from the bed obediently. After a night's rest, her emotions had stabilized. Although she wanted to beat the bad guy in front of her, she actually felt more sweetness in her heart. No matter what, as a girl, she was very satisfied to give her most precious thing to the man she loved the most. Whether Ji Dong admitted it or not, she had truly become his woman. After washing up, Chen Sichuan changed into a clean set of clothes. The Godfire Saint King armor on Ji Dong's body had already merged back into his body. However, Chen Sichuan vaguely discovered that under Ji Dong's clothes, there was a piece of armor left on his limbs. It was just that it was covered by his clothes. If it wasn't someone extremely familiar with him, they wouldn't be able to discover it. Why would he leave a few pieces of armor on his body? Chen Sichuan was confused, but she didn't ask. "Ji Dong, do you want to take a shower too?" Chen Sichuan probed. In reality, she really wanted to taste the hot spring again, but she didn't dare to rashly tease him again. Ji Dong shook his head and also did a simple wash. What made Chen Sichuan extremely surprised was that he actually took the initiative to hold her hand. With a warm smile, he said, "Let's go eat something, then we can go back to the palace together. From now on, I also have to get into character. We're lovers, right?" "Yes." Chen Sichuan stared at him with wide eyes as she nodded frantically. This couldn't be true, right? Could it be that he had already truly acknowledged her? However, at this moment, she faintly noticed that Ji Dong's eyebrows moved slightly. The hand holding her also seemed to tremble slightly. However, all of this happened very lightly. If she didn't carefully feel for Ji Dong's change, she wouldn't have noticed it. "Ji Dong, what's wrong? Are you all right?" Chen Sichuan asked with concern. Ji Dong shook his head and said, "I'm fine. I will definitely do what I promised you. Let's go." The two of them ate in the hotel. They hadn't had a proper meal for 2 days. This breakfast was quite a lot, especially for Ji Dong. It seemed as if he really didn't care about what happened that night. He ate to his heart's content and ate to his heart's content. His breakfast was enough for 4 or 5 ordinary people before he stopped. Letting out a long breath, Ji Dong smiled at Chen Sichuan and said, "It's really good to eat. It must have been hard on you these 2 days. You didn't eat much." As he spoke, he picked up the remaining half a bowl of milk and poured it into his mouth. Chen Sichuan frowned and looked at him. Although Ji Dong's expression was very natural and normal, she still felt that something was wrong. She lowered her voice and whispered, "Ji Dong, you didn't really cut it, did you?" Pfft. Ji Dong spat out all the milk in his mouth. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and spat it to the side instead of Chen Sichuan. He coughed continuously. Because the movement was too loud, it immediately attracted the attention of others who were also eating in the restaurant. Chen Sichuan hurriedly ran to Ji Dong's side and helped him pat his back. Ji Dong straightened out his breathing and raised his head to look at her angrily. He said, "Why are there so many dirty thoughts in your little head? Haven't all the misunderstandings been cleared up? Why did you cut it?" Chen Sichuan's pretty face turned red. Fortunately, she was wearing a veil, so it was somewhat covered. She mumbled, "I was afraid that you would really act on impulse." Ji Dong picked up the tissue on the table and wiped his mouth. He glared at her and said, "Let's go." The two of them left the hotel. Chen Sichuan moved to Ji Dong's side and tried to touch his hand. The gentle touch instantly made Ji Dong feel a little itchy. Chen Sichuan's cold hand felt great to the touch, especially when she was so careful, which made her look even more lovable. Ji Dong grabbed her hand. This time, he paid more attention. His body trembled again, but it was the other arm that Chen Sichuan did not notice. Last night, although Ji Dong only left the hotel for half an hour, he thought a lot during that time. He knew that he actually liked Chen Sichuan. He liked Chen Sichuan, but it wasn't love. It was because of Chen Sichuan, as well as her and the flaming bar's perfection. If this went on, he was afraid that his heart would really betray the flaming bar one day. While he was thinking about other things, the first thing he had to resolve was to have resistance towards Chen Sichuan. Resistance towards beautiful women was easy to say, but it wasn't so easy to actually do it. Chen Sichuan was known as the most beautiful woman in the world, and this title was not made up. Moreover, she was chasing after him. Ji Dong's resistance towards beautiful women was already extremely strong. His heart belonged to someone else, but even so, he was almost defeated by Chen Sichuan's corrosive attack. It could be seen how attractive Chen Sichuan was. Therefore, after careful consideration, Ji Dong came up with a solution. When the mythical king armor was activated with mana, sharp spikes would appear to attack the enemy. Ever since Ji Dong had fused it with his divine fusion, he could control when and where these spikes came out. Last night, Ji Dong had made all the spikes turn around. When he came into contact with Chen Sichuan's body, he would also activate his mana and move the spikes on the armor to stab himself. Although Ji Dong's body was tough, the mythical king armor was a demigod magic armor, and the spikes were extremely sharp. Under his control, of course it wouldn't really hurt him, but the intense pain in that instant was enough to wake up his tempted heart. He had already tried twice just now, and the truth proved that the effect was quite good. This also made Ji Dong secretly heave a sigh of relief. Right now, he only wanted to quickly complete the agreement with Chen Sichuan. After he returned, he would wholeheartedly devote himself to cultivation and take revenge for the raging flames. Of course, Chen Sichuan didn't know that Ji Dong's calmness was actually a method of self-harm to resist her charm. Seeing that Ji Dong seemed to have returned to normal, and seemed to be closer to her than usual, her heart gradually relaxed. She held Ji Dong's big hand tightly, and a satisfied smile appeared on her pretty face. This was Ji Dong's first time in Eastern Wood City, so naturally Chen Sichuan led the way. Eastern Wood City was also the capital, but it had its own unique characteristic. After seeing everything in the city, Ji Dong realized that it was actually the most beautiful city he had ever been to. This was a green city, and at the same time it was also a sea of flowers. Simply put, no matter where you stood in this city, no matter which direction you looked, there would be at least 10 different types of plants in your eyes. Eastern Wood City was not like the capitals of other countries, where the buildings were tall, luxurious, and looked imposing. It had a more like a paradise for plants. Few of the houses were more than 2 stories tall, and even the streets that were more than 10 meters wide were completely lined with trees. The dense trees on both sides of the road blocked the sunlight from the sky. Although the weather was getting colder, the feeling of prosperity was still very pleasing to the heart. "Is our Eastern Wood Empire beautiful?" Chen Sichuan asked with a smile. Ji Dong nodded and said, "It's very beautiful. This is the most beautiful city I've ever seen." Chen Sichuan giggled and said, "Our Eastern Wood Empire is rich in all kinds of fruits and flowers. Exporting these things to other countries is also a very big source of income for us. When we return to the palace later, I'll treat you to delicious fruit." "Okay." Ji Dong nodded and agreed. Eastern Wood City was not big. Not only was it not as big as Zhongyuan City, it was even smaller than Jin City. Soon, under Chen Sichuan's lead, the two of them arrived in front of the Eastern Wood Empire's palace. The palace was heavily guarded. There were at least 100 soldiers standing at the palace gate. There were also soldiers patrolling the wide and tall palace walls. Ordinary people were not allowed to go within 100 meters of the palace. Chen Xishuan confidently pulled Ji Dong's hand as they walked towards the palace gates. Before they could even get close, 20 soldiers had already moved, quickly getting into formation. 20 long spears were already pointed at them. The leader of the soldiers loudly shouted, "Halt! The palace is an important place. No one is allowed to approach. Anyone who violates will be killed without mercy." "Yes, I'm back." As Chen Xishuan spoke, she had already pulled down the veil on her pretty face. If it was any other member of the royal family who returned to the palace so lightly, it was hard to guarantee that the soldiers guarding the gate would not recognize her. They would probably have to carefully examine her and produce some proof of identity before she could enter the palace. However, Chen Xishuan was not an ordinary member of the royal family. Her perfect and stunning face was the best proof of identity. Her stunning beauty stunned all the soldiers at the same time. It was as if they had turned into statues. Chen Xishuan did not blame these soldiers. She turned to look at Hyoheim and winked at him with a bit of pride. It was as if she was saying, "Look, this lady's charm is not small." Ji Dong thought to himself, "If your charm was small, would I be able to refine the Godfire Holy Monarch armor? I'm going to have to stab myself again." After a moment of shock, the leader of the soldiers finally reacted. With a plop, he knelt on the ground and said, "Welcome back, Princess Xian." Following his shout, the other soldiers also reacted. They all knelt down, but no one dared to look at Chen Xishuan. Among them, there were not many who had seen Chen Xishuan before. After all, Chen Xishuan was usually deep in the palace. However, those who had seen her would naturally have a deep impression of the world's most beautiful woman. Who dared to look at her for too long? If they lost their composure, it would be a great crime. Chen Xishuan smiled and said, "Get up, everyone. Quickly send someone to inform my father that I have returned. I will return to my quarters first." As she spoke, she pulled Ji Dong's hand and was about to walk into the palace. The leader of the soldiers had already stood up. He did not dare to look at Chen Xishuan, but he raised his hand to block their way. He asked respectfully, "Your Highness, this gentleman is?" The leader of the soldiers was extremely shocked. One should know that Chen Xishuan was holding Ji Dong's hand. Although Princess Xian was a bit unruly, in the entire Dongmu Empire, her existence was a symbol, or even a super-idol. The Saintess of Dongmu, the most beautiful woman in the world. It could be said that Chen Xishuan was the pride of the Dongmu Empire. Their saintess was dragging a man back to the palace, and it was obvious that this man was not one of the 16 princes of the Dongmu Empire. What was going on? It was easy to tell that Ji Dong was not a member of the imperial family. His white hair was too special. There was no such person in the Dongmu Empire. Chen Xishuan snorted and said, "This is my man. What, are you going to stop me?" The leader of the soldiers and the surrounding soldiers were stunned by Chen Xishuan's words. By the time they reacted, Chen Xishuan had already pulled Ji Dong into the palace. Chapter 462. Chen Xishuan's words, "This is my man," instantly shocked everyone present. This news was simply too shocking. For a moment, all the soldiers stood there in a daze. "Why are you still standing there? Hurry up and report to your superiors." "No, I'll go myself." The soldier checked the accounts and left in a hurry. In terms of the vastness of the imperial palace, the Central Plains city was the best among the 5 countries on the continent, but in terms of vitality, it was the imperial palace of the Eastern Wood Empire. It was said that there were at least 3,000 kinds of plants in the imperial palace of the Eastern Wood Empire. Almost all the pavilions were hidden in these plants, like a paradise. Perhaps the imperial palace of the Eastern Wood Empire was not as majestic, but it was definitely the most comfortable among the 5 empires of the Radiant Continent. Ji Dong was pulled into the imperial palace by Chen Xishuan. His first impression was that this was simply a garden. At first glance, he could only see all kinds of plants, herbaceous, woody, and large areas of flowers competing with each other in beauty. Ji-dong could not name more than 80% of them. The fresh air was enough to intoxicate people. Sichuan, your father will definitely not be afraid of assassination, Ji-dong suddenly said. Chen Sichuan tilted her head and looked at him. Why? Ji-dong smiled bitterly. This imperial palace is simply like a maze. With so many plants, it is impossible to see where the palace is. How can we assassinate him? Chen Sichuan smiled. You are right. When the imperial palace of the Eastern Wood Empire was built, there was an expert guiding it. This place itself is a large wood attribute array called the 9-9 chain maze array. When someone comes in, they will naturally get dizzy and will naturally be easily caught. Don't think that this place is just for show. In terms of the degree of protection of the imperial palace, even the imperial palace of the Central Plains city can't compare. Ji-dong said, No wonder I feel that the magic fluctuations in the imperial palace are clearly much stronger than outside. It seems that this array also has the effect of enhancing the wood attribute element. No wonder you have such a high cultivation level at such a young age. With such a good place to cultivate, although it is not as good as the Dragon Valley, there is not much difference. Chen Sichuan smiled. Are you still talking about me? You're not that old, so how did you cultivate? Ji-dong laughed and said, I'm different from you. I started cultivating much later than you, but I have a good teacher. Chen Sichuan was stunned for a moment before she said, Good teacher? Do you mean Principal Zhu Rong? Ji-dong shook his head and said, Teacher Zhu Rong also cares a lot about me, but if I were to ask who helped me the most in my training, it's not him, but the flaming bar. Chen Sichuan's heart trembled. Looking at Ji-dong's eyes that were filled with nostalgia, she couldn't help but feel a little dazed for a moment. Ji-dong sighed softly and said, I only started cultivating after I was 10 years old. Everything that I have today can be said to be given to me by the flaming bar. If it wasn't for her company and guidance, I wouldn't be who I am today. She is my lover and also my teacher. It can be said that she gave me a new life. I have never thought that the flaming bar is mine, because I am hers. Do you understand, Sichuan? What made Ji-dong dumbfounded was that after hearing his words, Chen Sichuan's eyes began to gradually turn red. She said softly, The flaming bar is so good to you. What's more, you are so sentimental. Don't worry, I will take good care of you on behalf of the flaming bar in the future. As she said that, she pulled Ji-dong's hand to her face and gently rubbed it. Ji-dong's body trembled again. He had no choice but to use the thorns to free himself from this charming moment with the help of the pain. Chen Sichuan's gentleness would probably melt even a piece of iron. Little did he know that the person in front of him was his flaming bar. After what happened in the past 2 days, Ji-dong had thought through many things. He could not reject Chen Sichuan as strongly as he did in the past. Chen Sichuan had done so much for him, treated him so well, and even saved his life. He owed Chen Sichuan. Moreover, he realized that no matter how forceful he was, it would be useless against Chen Sichuan. Chen Sichuan's immunity was far beyond Ji-dong's imagination. He always thought that if it was another girl, she would probably not care about him anymore. Therefore, Ji-dong was prepared to use the method Chen Sichuan used to deal with him. He would move her with affection, moisturize her silently, and make her retreat. However, the tragic thing was that the effect was obviously not good when he used it for the first time. Not only did Chen Sichuan not feel sad because of it, she looked sympathetic and pitiful. He did not know that the more he expressed his deep feelings for the flaming bar in front of Chen Sichuan, the more it was equivalent to confessing to Chen Sichuan. Of course, she would only feel touched. Just as Ji-dong was feeling defeated and did not know how to deal with it, suddenly, his spirit stirred slightly and he looked in a direction. When Ji-dong noticed it, Chen Sichuan naturally noticed it too. The fusion between their souls seemed to have risen to another level. After Ji Dong looked in that direction, he turned his gaze back to Chen Xishuan with a face full of shock. This was because he was shocked to find that Chen Xishuan's soul and his had fused together casually. This time, he did not accept it of his own accord, but was passively accepting it. In other words, when Chen Xishuan's soul fused with his soul did not resist at all. It just fused naturally. What's going on? How could she be the dominant soul to fuse with my soul? Ji Dong did not even care about the voice on the other side, as he was extremely shocked. Ji Dong was not sure, but Chen Xishuan was very clear about it. She could not help but smile proudly. The reason why her soul could fuse with Ji Dong's soul so smoothly was actually very simple. It could be explained with one word: tacit understanding. The two of them already had a very high degree of tacit understanding. Every time their souls fused, it would make them more compatible with each other. The fusion of souls was not like the fusion of mana. It was much more difficult. Even a revered powerhouse might not be able to do it. This was because everyone had their own selfish motive. During the process of soul fusion, if there was even the slightest bit of selfishness, the fusion would not be successful. When Ji Dong and Chen Xishuan's souls first fused, Ji Dong's heart was like dead ashes because of the flaming bar. Naturally, he did not think too much about it. Needless to say, Chen Xishuan's love for him was even more selfless. That was why there was the first and most difficult fusion. And every time they fused, it was like they were cultivating and they would improve. This was also the feeling that Ji Dong had felt when he was gradually becoming more and more inseparable from the deep thought spiral. The night before yesterday could be said to be an explosion of their soul fusion. In terms of soul fusion, not to mention Ji Dong, even the flaming bar that had lived for countless years was not completely clear about it. The fusion of their souls caused Ji Dong's resistance to Chen Xishuan to gradually weaken, even though he was deeply in love with the flaming bar. Finally, it exploded under that special situation. Without the existence of soul fusion, with Ji Dong's self-control, he might not have been so affected even when facing Chen Xishuan's stunning beauty. Now, their casual fusion was the effect of the fusion of soul and flesh. It was also a process of qualitative change after their souls fused. If the Earth Dragon ancestor was here, he would be shocked to find that their soul fusion had reached a level that was very close to his own. Ji Dong's soul could no longer resist Chen Xishuan's soul fusion. Even if it was a one-sided fusion, it was the same for Chen Xishuan. Similarly, Chen Xishuan could not resist his soul fusion. This was because their souls had completely recognized each other. They completely understood that they would not hurt each other under any circumstances. Seeing the smile on Chen Xishuan's face, Ji Dong had no choice but to stab himself with the Holy King Divine Fire armor again. He only shifted his gaze away under the stimulation of the pain. "Xishuan, you're back. Why didn't you inform me in advance? I would have gone to pick you up." As the voice rang out, a tall figure strode through the forest towards Chen Xishuan and Ji Dong. Seeing this person, Ji Dong could not help but be surprised. With his level of cultivation, he naturally had a unique way of looking at people. The person who appeared in front of him was a middle-aged man who looked to be around 40 years old. He was tall, not at all inferior to Ji Dong. His body looked very sturdy, and he walked with a majestic gait. He had a dignified bearing, and wore a purple-gold crown with 8 gems on his head. He wore a bright yellow official robe, and he looked very spirited. Ji Dong simply glanced at him and found that this middle-aged man had at least 7 crowns of magic power. If he was really around 40 years old, reaching 7 crowns would already be a very impressive achievement. After all, abnormal existences like the heavenly stem saints were extremely rare. As expected of the Eastern Wood Empire's palace, it was indeed a place with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Ji Dong saw this middle-aged man, and the other was also sizing him up. Seeing Ji Dong standing next to Chen Xishuan and holding her hand in public, the middle-aged man's pupils visibly contracted. But that was all. There was no obvious change in his expression. Big brother. Chen Sichuan giggled. The middle-aged man laughed, opened his arms and said, "Quick, give Big Brother a hug. I haven't seen you for so long, Big Brothers all miss you." "No way." Chen Sichuan turned around and hid behind Ji Dong. If it was the old Chen Sichuan, she would naturally not object to this hug, but now she was in the flaming bar. Other than Ji Dong, she would not let anyone else touch her, even if it was a relative of this body. With Chen Sichuan hiding, Ji Dong naturally came face to face with the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man withdrew his arms and faced Ji Dong alone. His eyes clearly sharpened, and he said, "I have yet to ask, who is this little brother?" Ji Dong smiled indifferently. "I am Ji Dong." "Hello, Your Highness." From the clothes on his body and Chen Sichuan's address, he could naturally distinguish that the middle-aged man standing in front of him was the current crown prince of the Eastern Wood Empire. The middle-aged man stood still, his expression still unchanged, and said, "Hello, my name is Chen Xing." As he spoke, he took the initiative to extend his right hand to Hyoheim. Although Ji Dong clearly felt that the other party was testing him, the crown prince saw him holding his sister's hand, and it was the first time they met, but he could still be so calm, which had left a good impression on Ji Dong. He also raised his right hand and shook Chen Xing's hand casually and steadily. The two held hands, and Ji Dong suddenly felt a mellow first wood magic rushing into his body. Sure enough, as he judged, the big brother of Chen Sichuan in front of him had a cultivation base of more than 77 crowns. The expression on Ji Dong's face remained unchanged, and he even gently shook the other party's hand, as if they were really shaking hands, but Chen Xing's face was finally not so calm, and shock appeared on his face one after another. In the Eastern Wood Empire royal family, the first genius was undoubtedly Chen Sichuan, the Eastern Wood saint behind Ji Dong. At the age of 20, she had already broken through the 7 crowns and became a heavenly stem Imu saint. Even among the heavenly stem saints, she was second to none in terms of age. And second only to Chen Sichuan was the crown prince in front of him. Chen Xing was the eldest son of Emperor Chen Xiaofeng of the Eastern Wood Empire. When he was born, he was appointed as the crown prince. For so many years, his position as the crown prince had never been shaken, and there had never been any brothers who had the intention of fighting for the throne. Among the dozen brothers, the relationship was unusually harmonious. It had to be said that the crown prince's ability and strength were amazing, but in terms of talent and cultivation base, he was only lower than Chen Sichuan. Of course, in his own opinion, his cultivation base was higher than Chen Sichuan's. After all, Chen Sichuan left the imperial palace for 2 years. They did not know the degree of improvement in her cultivation base, and no one would think that Chen Sichuan's cultivation base could reach more than 70 level, or even had an impact on the 8 crowns. The main purpose of Chen Xing and Ji Dong's handshake was naturally to test each other. When he saw Ji Dong, although he looked calm on the surface, his heart was very calm. He knew that his little sister was not only a mischievous little witch, but also had a very high opinion of herself. She had the qualifications to be arrogant, but when he saw her with Ji Dong, she was clearly like a gentle kitten. He did not understand what ability this white-haired youth in front of him had to subdue his little sister. He was also very curious about Ji Dong's white hair. He even wondered if this person in front of him was really as young as he looked. When Chen Xing's magic power entered Ji Dong's body, this thought became even more real. He was shocked to find that after his magic power entered Ji Dong's body, it disappeared like a clay ox entering the sea. The other party simply held his hand, as if nothing had happened, but the magic power he had poured out had disappeared. Chapter 463. Chen Xing didn't believe it and increased the strength of his magic output, but there was still no response. Ji Dong's body was like a bottomless abyss, swallowing all of his magic output. Beads of sweat had already started to appear on Chen Xing's forehead, because he discovered that he couldn't let go even if he wanted to. Although Ji Dong didn't launch any attacks, none of his attacks had any effect. So what would happen if this continued? Alright, you two are men, why do you need so much time to shake hands? Chen Sichuan flashed out from behind Ji Dong and pulled Ji Dong's forearm. Ji Dong loosened his hand and let go of Chen Xing. Chen Xing also let out a big sigh of relief and forced himself to not lose his composure. But his body couldn't help but sway a few times before returning to normal. Dare I ask what magic attribute Senior has? Chen Xing's expression was already a lot more respectful. The status of a demon master was extremely high in the Five Elements continent. Even the royal families of various countries wouldn't be willing to offend a demon master with a profound cultivation. Senior? Big brother, are you mistaken? He is my man, how can you call him senior? He is only 22 years old. Chen Sichuan said in a bad mood. 22 years old? Chen Xing looked at Ji Dong with a dumbfounded expression. His face was full of disbelief. A 22-year-old could block his magic that was as high as level 73, and still act as if nothing had happened. This was clearly a cultivation that was close to the sovereign level. And if a sovereign-level expert wanted to disguise their age, it wasn't impossible. Little sister couldn't have been deceived, right? When he thought that Chen Sichuan might have been deceived by Ji Dong, Chen Xing's expression became somewhat ugly. His face revealed a clear hostility. Although he felt that Ji Dong's cultivation was unfathomable, this was still the Eastern Wood Empire's imperial palace. The change in Chen Xing's mood was naturally noticed by Chen Sichuan. She smiled slightly and pulled up Ji Dong's right hand and handed it to Chen Xing. Big brother, you can use your magic to feel Ji Dong's bones, and you will naturally know his true age. Do you think your smart sister will be deceived in this regard? Wood demon masters were best at medical treatment, whether it was the first wood or the second wood, they had their own way of observing bone age. Chen Xing heard his little sister say so and was slightly relieved, but he still held Ji Dong's wrist and probed it with magic. Ji Dong stood there, as steady as Mount Tai. Since he promised to cooperate with Chen Sichuan, he naturally had to act well. Chen Xing's expression became interesting as he probed with his mana. The hostility on his face gradually disappeared, and was replaced by an incredulous look of shock. Are you really only 22 years old? His bone age detection was not very accurate with his magic power, but it was not a problem for him to get a rough idea. No matter how he looked, Ji Dong was definitely not over 30 years old. No wonder, even though he was not very handsome, he was able to gain the favor of his little sister. This guy was simply a genius among geniuses. It was just that he did not know what level his cultivation had reached. Chen Xing winked at Chen Sichuan. Chen Sichuan understood, and the brother and sister walked to the side. What made Ji Dong a little funny was that Chen Sichuan did not cancel the soul fusion between them. Although they walked to the side, everything they said could clearly appear in Ji Dong's mind. Little sister, what's the matter with you? Didn't you like Brother Lin very much before? How come you only brought one back after 2 years, and you even shouted that he was your man at the gate of the imperial palace? Don't you know that this will put father in a difficult position? Chen Xing asked impatiently as he pulled Chen Sichuan to the side. Chen Sichuan giggled and said, Big brother, don't bother about my matters. This time, I came back to deal with this matter. I won't put father in a difficult position. Chen Xing said in a low voice, Little sister, you must give me a reason. You and Brother Lin grew up together. I know the relationship between the two of you very well. Although you are usually a little unruly, you are still very serious when it comes to relationships. How could you change just like that? Who is this person you brought back? You are still young, don't be deceived. The smile on Chen Sichuan's face faded a little. She snorted and said, I know what I am doing. I love Ji Dong from the bottom of my heart. How could he lie to me? He can't wait to have me. You don't know how hard it was for me to chase after him. What? Or did you chase after him? Chen Xing stared at his little sister in shock. In his heart, his little sister had always been the pride of the Eastern Wood Empire, the holy maiden of the Eastern Wood Empire. She actually chased after a man who wasn't very handsome. This was something that Chen Xing couldn't believe. Chen Xishuan sighed and said, "Big brother, do you believe in love at first sight? Jidong and I are like that. Don't worry, I am very clear about what kind of person he is. Only by being with him can I obtain true happiness. Not to mention that we are already together. Even if he doesn't want me, I will still stick to his side. Even if I can only see him every day, I will be very satisfied." Chen Xishuan's words were completely from the bottom of her heart. Ji Dong's soul was fused with hers, so naturally he could deeply feel it. His Godfire Saint King armor was fiercely stabbing itself again. Chen Xing was so shocked by Chen Xishuan's words that he couldn't speak. He only felt that after not seeing her for 2 years, his little sister seemed to have changed a lot, or perhaps her heart had changed. Without waiting for Chen Xing to speak again, Chen Xishuan already asked, "Big brother, have you seen Big Brother Lin recently?" Chen Xing's expression became serious as he said, "Little sister, Big Brother will tell you the truth. In 2 months it will be your wedding with Brother Lin. Recently, father has used all kinds of connections in the empire to find you. The Lin family is also very serious about this wedding and has given enough face. The 2 ancestors of the Lin family, as well as Brother Lin's parents and Brother Lin himself, have all come and are living in the imperial palace. Right now, father has blocked all news of you from them, only saying that you have gone out to study and will be back soon. Now that you've done this, how will father explain this to the Lin family?" Chen Xishuan pouted and said, "Big brother, could it be that you want my marriage to be a political product?" Chen Xing smiled bitterly. "With father's love for you, there shouldn't be a political marriage for you. But you were the one who promised Brother Lin. Now that you've gone back on your word, what do you want father to do? What do you want the Lin family to do? You have to understand the importance of the Lin family to our Dongmu Empire." Listening to the conversation between brother and sister, Ji Dong finally understood how big the implications of Chen Xishuan's annulment of the marriage were. Without a doubt, the 2 ancestors that Chen Xing spoke of were naturally the 2 Supreme Being experts that Chen Xishuan had mentioned. A family with 2 Supreme Being experts, one could imagine the power and influence of a family. Chen Xishuan impatiently continued to talk with Chen Xing and said, "In any case, I don't care, I'm not going to marry." As she spoke, her figure flashed and she appeared beside Ji Dong, pulling Ji Dong and walking towards the forest. "Xishuan!" Chen Xing called out from behind, but Chen Xishuan didn't have the slightest reaction. She pulled Ji Dong and walked away without looking back. Chen Xing sighed deeply and shook his head helplessly. This matter had to be discussed with father as soon as possible. He was very clear about his little sister's stubbornness. Now, he didn't know why she suddenly had a change of heart and wanted to be together with that white-haired youth, Ji Dong. He was afraid that this would cause a lot of trouble. Would the Lin family let this matter go? He was afraid that the Lin family had already known about his little sister's return and her shouting in the palace. Chen Xishuan's palace was not in the center of the palace, but in the east. What surprised Ji Dong was that her palace was actually located on an island in the middle of the lake in the palace. The green lake water was so clear that one could see the bottom. There was only a long corridor leading to Chen Xishuan's palace. "Welcome back to the palace, Your Highness." Before they got close, a large number of maids had already greeted them and knelt on the ground. The maids of the princess were usually maids, and there were rarely any eunuchs. "Get up, all of you. Without my orders, no one is to enter my palace. Wait outside. Oh right, prepare a banquet. I'm a little hungry." Chen Xishuan gave a series of orders as she pulled Ji Dong into the palace as if there was no one else around. Under her orders, no one dared to enter and disturb them. However, when they entered the palace, The group of maids looked at each other in shock. Her Highness had actually brought a stranger into the palace. Even young Master Lin didn't receive such treatment in the past. It should be known that the princess was still unmarried, so how could she bring a man into her palace? This was a huge taboo. Once this got out, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. Moreover, their princess was the Saintess of Tuki, the idol of the empire. Ji Dong, I've made things difficult for you. As soon as she entered the door, Chen Xishuan looked at Ji Dong pitifully. She intertwined her hands together and lowered her head like a little girl who had done something wrong. Ji Dong immediately turned his head away and thought to himself, Xishuan, Xishuan, don't you know how tempting you are? Why are you still putting on such an expression? As he thought about it, he fiercely stabbed himself a few more times. Xishuan, what are you going to do next? Ji Dong asked. Chen Xishuan shook her head and blinked. I don't know either. Ji Dong looked at her in surprise and said, You don't know either? You haven't thought about how to deal with this matter? Chen Xishuan shook her head again and said, It's up to you. Looking at her expectant face, Ji Dong was speechless again. It seemed that this matter was really troublesome. While he was thinking, a voice came from outside, Sister Xishuan, you're back? Hearing this voice, Ji Dong couldn't help but be a little surprised. When this voice came out, it was clearly nearly a kilometer away, but when the last word was said, the person had already stopped at the entrance of the corridor in the middle of the lake. So fast. Chen Xishuan saw that Hyoheim was moving. Ji Dong said indifferently, What will come will come. Let's go out together. From the moment he stepped into the imperial palace of Dongmu Empire, he knew that trouble would inevitably follow. Chen Xishuan held on to Ji Dong's arm and even leaned half of her body on Ji Dong. Only then did she walk out with Ji Dong. Ji Dong didn't object to her doing this. Since she had decided to come back to break off the engagement, she might as well be more direct and avoid the trouble of dragging things out. In the imperial palace of Dongmu Empire, Ji Dong was probably the only one who dared to have such an idea. Pride must be built on the foundation of strength. This was a lofty and unyielding character. Otherwise, one would be an idiot. The door opened, and Chen Xishuan walked out of the bedroom with Ji Dong. As soon as the two of them walked out, Ji Dong suddenly felt as if there were two cold lightnings streaking across the sky and attacking him. Obviously, it was not a sneak attack weapon, but a pair of eyes. Since the eyes were so focused, it could be seen that this person's cultivation was extraordinary. Standing at the other end of the corridor in the middle of the lake, a man in a white robe was the source of the two cold lightning streaks. This person looked to be about 26 or 27 years old. He was about the same height as Ji Dong, but his shoulders were not as broad as Ji Dong's. He was tall and slender, giving people a feeling that he was tall and straight, like those green bamboos in the forest that never bent and grew straight. Although this person was young, he gave people a refined and profound temperament. Even Ji Dong couldn't help but praise him in his heart after seeing him. He was indeed a talented person with extraordinary cultivation. Ji Dong could vaguely feel that this 26 or 27 years old young man's cultivation was even higher than Chen Xishuan's elder brother, Chen Xing. Such a person could definitely be called a genius. Unfortunately, his expression was extremely ugly right now. When he saw Chen Xishuan walking out with Ji Dong in her arms, his gaze instantly solidified, as if his pupils were constricting. A strong hostility was released without any concealment. Even when his gaze landed on Chen Xishuan, it did not show any signs of softness. Xishuan, I need you to give me an explanation. What's going on? The green-haired man in white said coldly. Chen Xishuan didn't loosen her grip on Ji Dong's hand. Instead, she tightened her grip and said, Brother Qianyu, I'm sorry. I can't be your wife anymore. I came back this time to break off the engagement. Hearing this, the man called Qianyu by Chen Xishuan suddenly clenched his fists, and a trace of anger appeared on his face. Although they were separated by dozens of meters in the middle of the lake, Ji Dong and Chen Sichuan could clearly feel the strong magic waves released by his body. Chen Sichuan sighed softly and said, "Let me introduce you. Ji Dong, this is Brother Qianyu, my good friend when I was young. He has always been taking care of me. Brother Qianyu, this is—" Before she could finish her words, Lin Qianyu interrupted her, "Enough, I don't need to know who he is. I'm not interested in this kind of cat or dog. Sichuan, tell me honestly, what happened? I don't believe that our relationship would end like this. Are you being threatened by someone or do you have any difficulties? Tell Brother Qianyu that I'll take care of everything for you,